People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Good morning. It's 6 o'clock on Friday, the 16th of June. Today, Tories in turmoil. Boris Johnson's political career remains on the precipice as the Conservative Party tears itself apart.
Emotional scenes in Nottingham as thousands gathered to pay their respects to the victims of this week's attack.
Mortgage misery as one of the country's biggest lenders raises the cost of borrowing twice in 1 week.
And as always, we'll bring you the latest weather update.
Warm and sunny sums up the weather again for most today, but humidity is building and there's an increasing chance of seeing some thunderstorms becoming more widespread through this weekend. For a full forecast, join me later.
Good morning to you. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Anne Diamond, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
Lots to get through today, lots of quite sort of serious and heavy news, but there's some lighter things as well. I know. Now, what's piqued your fancy? We've got a selection, Anne.
Well, I'm very interested that Al Pacino has become a father at the age of 83. Now, what does that mean? Apparently, it's even surprised him.
Yes, he had to have
to the point that he
test.
insisted on a paternity test, yeah. But at 83, he has indeed become a father. And we've always known that men can. Wasn't it Charlie Chaplin who fathered a child at the age of 80?
I just don't think it's very responsible.
Well, Al Pacino clearly thought that he didn't need to take any precautions, didn't he?
Yeah.
But men can't they? They can go on fathering children till very, very late in life. And it just made me wonder, how common is that? I mean, a lot of men have one family during their career, and then much later they have a second family. They often say they enjoy their second family more, their children more, even though they're much older because they've got more time. They're sometimes retired.
But that means then that they get there with their second family. They're getting together with a much, much younger. I mean, Al Pacino's 83. His not girlfriend, because they don't seem to be together, but this lady's 29.
Oh, that is young. Yeah. Mick Jagger has been in the newspapers today simply because he was walking through an airport, and they got some good pictures of him. But he is. Ooh, what's he? 80.
It's something like that.
Yeah, and his eldest child is 52. Now, that just shows, doesn't it? I mean, and Mick Jagger is still a new father, quite a new father. I just wondered if there's anyone watching now who comes from a family where there is a much older father. And how old is too old, do you think?
It's about raising the children, I think, and what's good for the children, because they're not going to know their father.
They've got a young mum, but no, they're not going to know their father.
No, they're not. The other thing, what caught my eye is it's 60 years of the Blue Peter badge. Big piece in the Mirror this morning.
Did you have one?
No, see, it's always just what I wanted one. I wrote to Biddy Baxter and asked for one.
Yeah.
And she wrote back and said, well, you can't have one, Stephen, because you need to do something.
You've got to earn it.
You've got to earn it.
To earn a Blue Peter badge. It
But I
was
just
a
thought I
real.
could
It was
ask
a
for
badge of
one.
honour, wasn't it?
It was a huge thing.
If I remember being at school, and if anyone got a Blue Peter badge, they were to bring it into morning assembly, and everybody would clap them and everything like that. It was a Blue Peter badge was very, very important.
It was. So if you've got a Blue Peter badge,
Tell us how you
I
got it.
bet you've kept hold of it.
Yes.
Even if you're in your 70s now, whatever, I bet you've kept hold of your Blue Peter badge.
Yeah, one of my sons has got a Blue Peter badge because he sang in a choir at some do or other that was a big Blue Peter event.
It could get you in
And
free at places.
We've still got it. Yes, it could get you in, couldn't it?
Yeah, all sorts of places.
I wonder if that works now.
I don't know.
The other thing that worried me, well, it doesn't worry me, but it fascinated me, is there's a big manor house in Dorset that's going up for sale for first time in hundreds of years because it's always been passed down through the family. But for the first time, the owner has now died with no children to leave it to. It's an enormous manor house called Sandford Orcus Manor. It's in Dorset. It looks absolutely splendiferous.
It does look very nice.
And it's only going for 6.5 million, which for that sort of house... Well, for that sort of house, I would have thought...
Something you're not telling me, Anne
That's
Diamond.
not too... No. I'd love to... Actually, would I love it? Would anyone really love it? Maybe this is why the price isn't astronomical, because apparently it comes with loads of ghosts. There's a lady in red and a screaming sea cadet, a footman who preyed on serving wenches, and a priest who refuses to appear before any woman who's not a virgin. So would you buy, if you could, would you buy a lovely old manor house, which I think is going for a song, but because it's got ghosts? And have you ever seen a ghost? Have you ever lived in a house that's said to be haunted? Love to hear from you.
Oh, yes, you know how to do it. GBnews.com. I think the priest will be having a quiet life, or a quiet death. But there you go.
Well, if he doesn't appear to you, you know what he's saying about you.
Well, there you go. Disgraceful. Now, to our main news this morning, disingenuous to the point of being deliberately misleading. Those are the damning words used by the Privileges Committee to describe Boris Johnson.
But the former Prime Minister branded the findings deranged, sparking a row now amongst Tory MPs about whether or not to vote for the report.
Let's talk to political editor of HuffPost UK, Kevin Schofield. Morning to you, Kevin. I mean, look, this is a big hoo-ha, no doubt, but is there going to be that much support for Boris Johnson, do you think, when it comes to the vote on Monday?
There certainly will be support. I mean, I think a few Conservative MPs will vote for him or vote against the report, I should say. You know, his outriders were out and about yesterday, people like Jacob Rees-Mogg, Nadine Dorris, saying that this was unfair, over the top. So, yeah, so there will be those who will vote against this report. It will be endorsed, though. The opposition parties will all vote for it, and enough Conservative MPs will also vote for it. That being said, though, it will be interesting to see what the Prime Minister does. There's speculation in the papers this morning that he might find a reason not to be there to take part in the vote, and I think there'll be quite a few other Conservative MPs, I think, in the same boat. They will find excuses, I think, to remain in their constituencies and not take part. So again, the splits within the Conservative Party will be there for the entire public to see.
What do you think of all the detail that's further come out from the report? I mean, does it feel to you like a witch hunt or a hatchet job? Or do you think, fair enough, it's a report, you can't criticise the committee?
Well, I think it's interesting that no one, even Boris Johnson's supporters, have come out and said there's anything inaccurate or wrong in the report. Now, they're taking issue with the emphasis, I think, that is being placed on some of Boris Johnson's misdemeanours. I spoke to one former minister last night who was a supporter of Boris Johnson, who thought it was absolutely extraordinary, completely over the top. Clearly, they are very annoyed, not just at his initial offence of misleading Parliament, but I think what happened last week after he'd received an initial draft copy of the report. Obviously, you know, he came out, was very critical of the committee, quit as an MP, and they've decided that that was a further contempt and slapped an extra sanction on him, although that can't be imposed, obviously, this 90-day ban from Parliament, because he's no longer a member of Parliament. So, yeah, I think it's safe to say that there was a lot of bad blood between Boris Johnson and the committee, and that is obvious for when you read the report.
Yeah, and does that not damage the credibility of the committee somewhat? Because it does seem like they've been drawn into something more personal or more political or both, rather than taking, you could take a strong line. You could have gone for 10 days, 20 days even, something like that, which would have been, in the scheme of things, severe. But to have this bad blood and to throw an unprecedented 90 days at him, it actually plays in Boris Johnson's favour in some regards, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think some people who are even no fans of Boris Johnson will think maybe that the committee has overreached, and there's a danger that they turn Boris Johnson into a martyr. He can point to the report and say, this is completely over the top. I've been the victim of a stitch-up, which is exactly what he's saying. Therefore, it's all very unfair. That being said, I think, it's unquestionable that he was guilty. The thing about the report as well is it's very methodical. They've gone into it in great detail. There is evidence there to back up their findings. So yeah, although I think the 90 days, when you consider that Margaret Ferrier, the former SNP MP, got 30 days for going across the country while she had COVID, you wonder whether the punishment completely fits the crime. But there's no doubt at all that Boris Johnson's in a very difficult position. One supporter said to me last night, if anyone can come back, he can, but the findings of the report make it much more difficult for him.
Well, it's interesting because everybody's having their say about it at the moment. Even the former Prime Minister Liz Truss, because she told GB News last night that the Privileges Committee decision does seem, even to her, harsh.
I'm not going to question the integrity of these MPs. We do have these committees that have been set up. But it does seem to me a very harsh decision. That's my impression.
Boris Johnson's Foreign Secretary, you remained loyal to him over your time in the Cabinet. What do you think his legacy is, and can he still stage a political comeback?
Well, never, ever, ever write Boris off. That is something that I think is very, very clear, and I'm sure we will hear more from him.
It's interesting, isn't it? Nobody wants to write him off, people who know him. But as you say, it almost seems impossible for him to come back within the Conservative Party, doesn't it?
Well, if he is going to come back, I think it would be in the Conservative Party. I don't see him, there's been talk of a signing up with Nigel Farage in some sort of right of centre political project. I don't see that happening. I think if he is to come back, it will be as a Conservative MP at some stage, probably after the next election. The thing is, he is still popular with a significant chunk of Conservative members. I don't think he would have too much difficulty finding a Conservative association who would choose him as their candidate if they were allowed to do so by Party HQ. I think at the moment, given the bad blood between him and Rishi Sunak, I say that's probably unlikely. But yeah, after the next election, who's to say he might well come back? No one wants to write him off because the guy has been through trouble before and come back and ultimately became Prime Minister. And he'd still love to be Prime Minister again. But this does make it more difficult. And the path to number 10 for him, very tricky indeed, particularly when you consider that Labour are so far ahead in the opinion polls and are on course at the moment to win the next election. It could be, 5, probably 10 years before he has any chance of becoming Prime Minister again. And you wonder, will he want to do it then? So, I wouldn't write him off, but it's very tricky right now to see a path back to the absolute peak of British politics for him.
Yeah, certainly to number 10. Great to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed, Kevin. It's, anything, they always say a week is a long time in politics, but it certainly is in the Tory party. It seems that anything can happen within a couple of months in the Tory party at the moment.
Just all changes so quickly. It is 6:12. Let's remind you of the top stories this morning. And former Prime Minister Liz Truss has told GB News that she's still determined to fight for Conservative values. It's her first major TV interview since leaving Downing Street. She said some MPs do not understand how to improve people's lives across the country.
The National Audit Office says the government has a long way to go to meet its asylum backlog goal. It claims it would take 2,200 decisions on cases a week to clear it by the end of the year. That's despite 1,130 weekly decisions being made during April. And the Home Office says it's working non-stop to reduce the asylum backlog.
Popular family meal items have increased by up to 27% in the last year. That's according to the consumer group Which. It says people pay between 60 to 80 pence more for items like pasta bake, beans and fish fingers. The company says the cost of a typical Sunday roast has gone up by 13%.
And midwives in England are working 100,000 extra unpaid hours each week. That's according to the Royal College of Nursing, which also says the maternity services remain consistently understaffed. But the government says it continues to invest in growing the maternity workforce.
Now to the situation in Nottingham. What an awful, awful week it has been. Detectives have been given more time to question a former University of Nottingham student over that deadly knife and van rampage on Tuesday.
Yes, and yesterday saw the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, laying a wreath before a vigil then was held in the city's Market Square for the two students and the school caretaker who lost their lives.
Let's head to our national reporter, Ellie Costello, who's in Nottingham for us this morning. It's just unbelievable as this investigation goes on, Ellie. Impossible to comprehend how families, friends, fellow students, indeed the city itself, comes to terms with this.
Yes, good morning to you both. Absolutely impossible to comprehend, and you really do get the sense that this city is grieving, but you also get the sense that this city is together in this. We're at Old Market Square in Nottingham now, and for the benefit of our radio listeners, you can see the sign up there on the council building that says #Nottingham Together. Many people yesterday actually had that hashtag on the T-shirts that they were wearing at the vigil, very much a sense of a community coming together. And yesterday we saw the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, lay a wreath at the steps of the council house behind us. She looked very visibly moved reading the tributes that have been laid there in front of the council house. And then last night at about 5:30 there was a vigil here in Old Market Square where thousands of people, hundreds of students actually came to pay their respects to the three people that lost their lives in the early hours of Tuesday morning. We actually heard from the mothers of Grace O'Malley Kumar and Barnaby Webber for the first time, and we also heard from the sons of Ian Coates, the caretaker who lost his life in the early hours of Tuesday morning. Very moving scenes. Let's have a listen to what they had to say.
Dealing with what's happened, we still haven't took it all in, so we just wanted to say a few things. My dad was an avid fisherman, he loved his family, and he also loved his forest, the US.
The monstrous individual who has shattered so many lives will not define us. And I know he will receive the retribution that he deserves. However, this evil person is just that. He is just a person. Please hold no hate that relates to any colour, sex or religion.
It just is truly so unfair. But I'll echo what my husband said yesterday. Be kind to each other, look after each other. Don't have hate in your hearts.
I mean, many people will be listening to that and feeling very moved by it, but they'll also be asking, how can you possibly use that time to send a message of love? How can you stand there and speak so beautifully? And I think many people left here last night, left that vigil, feeling very inspired by their example, the example of those very, very brave families who spoke last night. Well, meanwhile, of course, the investigation into what happened in the early hours of Tuesday morning continues. That includes CCTV gathering, forensics, eyewitness accounts, and also is searching a number of properties in the city. We know that police have been given more time to question the man that is currently being held on suspicion of murder. They can now hold him for a total of 4 days, a total of 96 hours. So that questioning will still be continuing today. Nottinghamshire Police have also confirmed that it has referred part of the incident of Tuesday morning to the Independent Office for Police Conduct, and that's because a marked police car was actually following the suspect's van, that stolen van, before it collided with 2 pedestrians. That detail emerging yesterday. So Nottinghamshire Police have referred part of that incident to the Independent Office for Police Conduct. Another line of information we got yesterday is that the suspect is a former university student at the University of Nottingham, but at this point it doesn't think that that is any way connected to the attack. But the university is reeling from the shock of losing 2 of its students. The flag at the University of Nottingham is flying at half-mast today, as it has been since Wednesday, and they are offering support for all students who need it. The police are working alongside counter-terrorism officers, but they are telling the public that they are keeping an open mind on the motives of this attack until that questioning comes to an end. But this morning, Stephen and Anne, the city is still reeling from the shock of Tuesday morning, but it is united in grief and united in love.
OK, Ellie, for now, thanks very much indeed.
I must say everybody's been so struck by the unbelievable grief, but also the dignity of the families involved. And they have been remarkable in the way they've also called for look after each other and not to hate. And I think that's very important coming from them. It's incredibly powerful.
It is, and it's it takes a special sort of person to be able to say that under the circumstances, I think. But I really feel for students in Nottingham. I know a lot of them will be preparing to leave now at the end of their academic years, but it is a student city.
Yes,
and it comes alive with the student. I mean, I studied in Nottingham, then worked in Nottingham afterwards, and it's an amazing city, and it's quite small. It's quite a close city. It's not anything like London or Birmingham. It's much.
It was a city of lace makers. Did you know that?
It is indeed, yes. Lace markets.
They always said the most beautiful women came from Nottingham because, in fact, they were an awful lot of ladies were imported into Nottingham to make the lace. It was very famous for that, and. It is a beautiful city, and of course, when you go to a school or a college or anything where something happens, you feel it. It is a family, isn't it? You feel it very strongly. So I just admire those parents for entreating for peace and calm and love, which is the only way to make any sense of this, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Anyway, if you've got any thoughts on that, gbviews@gbnews.com. We've got much more to come, including the latest on what seems like even more mortgage misery. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
This is Breakfast with Steve and Anne at 6:23. Good morning to you. I've already had someone get in touch saying, have you got a frog in your throat this morning? I have a little bit.
It's funny, well, sometimes you just wake up with one and you don't know where it came from.
No.
Or where it goes, hopefully.
Need to get more tea, please.
Yeah.
I'll sort it out.
I was asking you a bit earlier if you've ever lived in a haunted house or you've ever seen a ghost. And already, Roger says, hi, we live in a 200-year-old cottage in Oxfordshire, and we have a ghost who mischievously hides things and turns off lights. He is thought to be a young World War I soldier who was killed in France.
Oh, I wonder why he would end up in Oxfordshire then.
Well, maybe that was his home.
Maybe, but I thought
He's trying to
ordinarily it seems to be sort of where you died is where you would haunt.
No, you don't know. There
I
aren't
don't
any
know.
rules. Are there rules?
Are there rules?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Genevieve's got one as well.
Oh, yeah, go on. It's a long one. I haven't read through it.
All right. So last year, she said, I transformed our spare room from a storage facility into what I think is a lovely guest room. As I was the one that put in all the work, decorating, putting together the furniture, etc., I told my husband if one of us needed to go in to get some sleep, it would be me. He went in, though, one night, told me the next day he's not going in again. Seemingly, we have a resident ghost who knew my thoughts and wasn't happy with him. He said he was hit on the back of the head twice.
Oh.
By a ghost.
Oh, there you go.
If you've ever lived in a haunted house or seen a ghost, we're talking about this because there's this big mansion in Dorset going up for sale that is apparent. It's got a whole retinue of ghosts, and I'm thinking that's why they're probably not going to get much money for it.
Give over.
Would you buy a house that was famous for its ghosts?
Yeah. What's a ghost going to do to you?
Well, hit you on the head by the sound of it.
No. Don't believe it. Don't believe it. Kevin from Norfolk. Hi, Kevin. I'm 66 and I've still got my Blue Peter badge. Got it as part of a prize for a Spot the Difference competition, and we found more differences than was stated. So
right, OK.
There you go. We also won a Dalek kite.
A Dalek kite.
You see, do they still do all that sort of thing on kids' TV today, where you get in touch, you win a little something, you get a Dalek kite. I mean, a Dalek kite probably worth about £1 or something. But it's just that whole idea of
But a Blue
winning
Peter badge
something.
was important. Very, very unbelievably important. Yeah. Ant from Hereford says, morning, Stephen and Anne. I've still got my Blue Peter badge. I'm 45 now, and I got it in the early 80s from sending in a picture that I drew. I also still have my TVAM mug, which is just as important, and I got that by writing to TVM and asking for it. My motto is, if you don't ask, you don't get.
Yeah, well,
I've still got my TVM egg cup.
Have you?
Yeah, very important.
Yeah, well, I'm a great believer in asking for things.
Well, if you don't ask, you don't stand a chance, as long as you ask nicely.
Yeah, well, it didn't work with Biddy Baxter.
Well, but Biddy Baxter had rules.
She had rules,
the whole
and
of
she
Blue
stuck
Peter
to
was
them.
set up on rules, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And in fact, Bill from the Wirral,
But she did
Bill.
write back, but she wrote
I know,
back
she wrote
personally.
Back, she bothered, yes.
Which was nice.
That's something. In fact, that letter would be worth having
Probably worth
now,
a bob or
wouldn't
two
it?
now. I probably haven't got it.
Bill from the Wirral, hi there, Bill, says, I didn't have a Blue Peter badge, but I did have a magpie badge. Does anyone remember magpie?
I remember magpie. I didn't like it as much, though.
It wasn't quite the same, was it?
No. It's interesting when you write to people, though. I always very fondly... I'd never met the manager, Andy Crane. He was in the broom cupboard before Philip Schofield. Yeah. And he's up in... He was doing news in Manchester. I hear him on 5 Live occasionally now. Oh. But I wrote to him when he was in the broom cupboard saying, oh, what do you recommend I should do for exams and things? I want to get into the media, And he wrote me a long letter back, really detailed letter back. And I've never forgotten that. But what a really nice gesture that he took the time and said it was like a couple of pages of A4.
Some do.
Nice fella. I've always felt very fondly towards him. I've never met him.
Yeah. Oh.
So there you go. So writing.
I've forgotten about him.
Andy Crane, yeah, it was great.
Gosh.
Anyway, there you go. Let's move on, should we? Because after talking about some nice things. It's bad news now, I'm afraid. If you're a mortgage holder, one of the country's biggest lenders, HSBC, raised the cost of borrowing twice in the last week.
And the move will affect new and existing customers looking for a mortgage when their existing one comes to an end, of course, or seeking to remortgage.
So, will the other banks follow those steps? Probably. Let's talk to senior personal finance analyst Myron Jobson, who joins us now. Myron, good to see you this morning. First and foremost, on what basis does a bank raise interest rates twice in a week? You can understand them doing it off the back of the Bank of England raising the base rate, but why would they do it twice?
Yes, good morning both. Good to be on despite this topic. It's been such a headache-inducing experience for those who have a mortgage, looking to remortgage, those who are seeking to get a mortgage. And the reason why HSBC will do such a thing is because of a new sense that interest rates will go higher than expected. I mean, it wasn't long ago where the market thought that interest rates will reach a peak of 5%. It's at 4.5% at the moment before flatlining and then decreasing. Then people revised that sentiment, saying that the interest rates will increase to 5.5%. Now it's predicted, the market predicts, 8% of the market predicts that interest rates could go as high as 5.75% or even 6%. And the reason why HSBC would remove their mortgages is because it's all about protecting margins. If interest rates are going to go higher than what they deem, and they've also been inundated with applications to refinance and from new customers seeking to get mortgages. They want to protect margins, so they pulled these mortgages twice in a week, which is quite outstanding. Actually, it's quite sad. I can't remember the last time that's happened. In order to protect margins.
I mean, we're saying what misery it is for those who were just thinking of getting a mortgage and now can't, or those who've just got one and now terrified of whether they're going to be able to continue to pay it. Could it recover as quickly, or is this going to be doom and gloom for a while yet?
It's quite interesting. The reason why mortgage rates have gone up again, interest rates are going up to just combat inflation, which seems to be really running hot still, and it seems to be quite sticky. So a lot depends on how fast we are and how effective we are at bringing down inflation. But there's a sense that once there's a good consensus that interest rates will flatline and start to go down, then we can perhaps see the mortgage market calm down significantly. But in the short term, it seems that with uncertainty brings more mortgage gloom, as in people, lenders will start looking at their deals thinking, are they competitively priced? If they're not, they'll pull them and they'll put them back in the market, but unfortunately at a higher price.
What's the betting then in terms of what's going to happen over the next year or so? Because, a lot of people will be saying, do I go for a fixed rate and try and save money in the short term, or am I better on something variable in the hope it may start to drop?
Yeah, exactly. It's so hard, isn't it, to answer those kind of questions without a functioning, crystal ball. We expect inflation to be a lot lower now than it is at the moment, and we have no idea what inflation might look in a year's time. But the hope is that it would have come down significantly and reaching around the 4% level. And if that's the case, then interest rates wouldn't need to go up as fast or at all as they have been doing recently. And for those who are approaching the end of the fixed-term mortgage deals, there's around 700,000 mortgage holders with fixed-term deals expiring at the end of the year, most of which were fixed at under 2%. And just put that into context, the average 2-year fixed rate deal comes with the interest rates of around 5.9%, and the average 5-year fixed rate deal comes with an interest rate of around just over 5.5%. And so it's just really hard for mortgage those who do mortgage to know what to do. Should I go for a fix? Should I fix for long term now, or should I just wait until things get better? But we just don't know what will happen. And I always say to people in this situation, it's just speak to your mortgage advisors, and if you can, get a deal on the table, because deals on tables last for around 6 months. And so once a deal's on the table, will be on the table for 6 months, and then you can then assess your options during that period.
Yeah, give you 6 months to think it through as much as possible and to see if things are getting any better. Yeah, thanks very much indeed. Lovely to talk to you, Myron. Thank you.
Yeah, you've got to really think about it carefully.
It's a terrifying decision to make.
It is.
Even in good times, it's quite a difficult decision to take, isn't it?
It's always a bit of a gamble, but at the minute, tying yourself in at 5.5% for 5 years. 5 years is a long time.
A lot of money just to borrow it, aren't you?
Yeah, you are. We're talking about older fathers. Al Pacino's had another child at the age of 83. Dave's been in touch. Hi, Dave.
Hello, Dave.
He said, my dad had children at 96, but it annoyed my mum as we lived at 91. Ah, a good one, Dave.
Sexually active at 96, Dave says. Gosh, that's quite something, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it's a joke, Anne.
Oh!
He had children at 96, but they lived in 91.
Yeah. Oh, I see, I think. God, if you're going to be funny, can you make it a bit more easy to understand, please?
That's a good dad joke.
It's a very good dad joke. I'm beginning to understand it.
Thank you, Dave.
Yeah. Helen says, my dad was 58 when he had me. He was 19 years older than my mum. Sadly, he died at 66 when I was just 8.
Oh.
And he had a stroke when I was 2, so most of my memories of him are of visiting him in hospital. And that's why a lot of people think it's selfish to have a child. Even if you're the man, and you obviously still can, it's selfish to have a child when you're
that old.
When you're that old.
I mean, look, you can't be too critical of people, can you? But it's...
No, because usually they've made a new association with a woman who wants a family. And though she's younger, she wants a family.
I just don't think it's fair. I don't think it's fair on the kids. I mean, Shelley says, I don't know why you think Al Pacino's irresponsible, because millions of children don't know their fathers who are simply absent. I mean, that's a fair point. It's a fair point. But it's... You absolutely know you're not going to be around for that long if you're having children.
But it's like Helen said, that most of her memories of her father are visiting him in hospital. And that is sad, isn't it?
Yeah, it is sad. Anyway, any thoughts? GBviews at gbnews.com. Coming up, we're going to be looking at all the headlines in the papers. This is Breakfast on GB News.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Morning to you, it's 6:36. This is Breakfast with Stephen and Anne.
Shall we have a look at today's newspapers? And if we look at The Guardian first, Boris Johnson, by the way, dominating most of the papers again, but The Guardian are taking aim at him there, the verdict on Johnson.
The Telegraph has a nice picture of a very young Glenda Jackson, passed away yesterday morning at 87, an Oscar-winning actress, multiple Oscar-winning actress, actually, and former Labour MP.
Lovely, lovely lady. Quite formidable.
Oh, she was formidable.
She was a bit fierce to interview, wasn't she?
Oh, she was.
You had to be on your mettle.
On your
but she was
guard.
amazing, yeah. The Times has a haunting picture of Barnaby Webber's family at yesterday's vigil in Nottingham. They were met with an outpouring of love by the city.
And the Mail has, oh dear, oldest swingers in town.
Let's take that.
Take that from yesterday's premiere of their new film, with two of them in matching white blazers and Mark Owen looking like he's been dragged through a hedge backwards.
Is that Mark Owen on the right?
That's Mark Owen.
Just for the sake of our radio listeners, there's a guy in what looks like a yellow trouser suit.
With scraggly hair and a bit
very
of
straggly hair.
pathetic facial hair.
That is a weird picture.
It's awful. I don't know what he's got. He looks like he's gone to rack and ruin. He really does.
It's just his way.
It's these creatives for you.
It's his way.
There you go. Smarten up, Mr. Owen. Let's go through the papers then with author Nikki Hodgson and journalist Ella Whelan. Good to see you both this morning.
Morning.
Let's tear ourselves away from that awful picture to in the Mail, Ella, looking at Boris Johnson.
Yes, I detect a note of sort of sigh in your voice, which is that, yes, it's all over the papers. This verdict I don't think it will come as a surprise to anyone, although probably the severity of some of the recommendations probably did raise a few eyebrows, and the Mail is focusing in on the Tory revolt that could come of the vindictive bid to banish Boris, as they describe it. And sort of looking at the fact that MPs will have a vote on the inquiry's recommendations. And interestingly, the Conservative Party has said that there won't be no sanction for missing the vote. And so there is now kind of speculation over whether Boris Johnson will be able to rely on, well, he certainly won't be able to rely on enough, but a significant number of MPs that will back him and make that leap in the Commons. But it's more likely that a lot of them are going to abstain, and certainly it's, across several of the papers, it's pretty agreed upon that Rishi Sunak is not going to show his face. The feud between them is now well known and sort of bordering on the teenage. Actually, I think that it would be a step too far for him to come in and really dig the nail in the coffin to Boris Johnson. But as you were talking about with Kevin Schofield earlier in the programme, the question is, does this really mean the end of Johnson? If he has all of his privileges stripped from him, could he find political influence in other areas? The Mail is looking at whether or not how this affects the Conservative Party itself, which I think probably is what interests most of us most, because they are the party of government, at least for now.
Can I ask, though, in all of this, ask both of you, do you think, you say it's no surprise that they've come to this conclusion, right? And sort of fair enough in a way, but hasn't the committee absolutely shot themselves in the foot and do look vindictive because of the sanctions that they have applied, or would have applied if he was still an MP?
Yes, I think they have discredited themselves in some ways, because it's, you have to think about things in the public interest, which these things are supposed to be acting in on the basis of. Everybody knew that about the Partygate things. I think we can probably say that everybody knew that Boris Johnson did know that there was some kind of party. We sort of, that was almost settled within public conversation. We kind of were like, OK, we don't really care. He's not Prime Minister any longer. This certainly wouldn't be top of my priority list in relation to investigating things to do with the pandemic. And the fact that it has become all about whether or not he was in this particular room and whether or not he had a particular drink.
Ella, it hasn't. It's about his lying. It's about his serial lying, and that is what is upsetting people, because it's undermining the quality of a Prime Minister we expect. He lied to the committee, when it was obvious exactly what you just said. It was very clear that he did know what was going on. There were parties, and then he lied again to the committee. That's not a good way to start an inquiry, is it? No. If you lie to the people that are inspecting you, they're not really going to be on your side. You've got to expect... I don't think they've been vindictive at all. I think they've just been very, very truthful, because this is a really important moment for politics in this country, because this will decide the calibre of the next tranche of Prime Ministers that we get.
I agree with you that lying is important. That condemning lying is important. But we all... It's hard to defend this, because I'm sort of defending a liar, and I don't want to be doing that. But it's like we all knew what Boris Johnson was about. I think we all knew the kind of way in which he politically operated. And if you zoom out from the immediacy of the things that he said to the committee, there's, I think, more general sense that Boris Johnson represents, at least for MPs, things that they don't like. He represents Brexit, even though, as a Brexiteer, I'd say that was pretty sick-making. He represents a particular kind of political... there's people across different papers talking about the end of populism. There's just a lot more going on here, and I think that's what makes people think that this inquiry isn't specifically about saying we will have proper standards in the Parliamentary House. It's actually much more political with a capital P. It's about a lot more of the kind of power plays that are happening in Parliament. And for the average punter and voter, that's very annoying, because you think, well, this isn't just about lying, this is about your own kind of machinations. And Boris Johnson, like it or loathe it, did come to symbolise something different in that 2019 moment, whereas at lots of the MPs were anti-Brexit, they had been acting pretty undemocratically up until that point. He came along and, OK, he's a chancer, but he came along and said, I'm going to go for this People's Party thing, and whether that's nonsense or not, at least he symbolised that. But I mean, that seems to be being crushed.
He's got charisma. That's all he's got, in my opinion. That's all he's got going for him. If he's as clever as he makes out, then it's impossible to believe that he was, not aware all the way through the pandemic that what he was allowing to happen in his government and with these parties was going to get somebody into big trouble sooner or later. He's too smart for that, apparently, so he tells us. His downfall is his ego, because he's just so obsessed with being in power,
but don't
with being
all
seen as positively. I don't. So everyone, of course, they're all on a spectrum, but some of them genuinely care about the public interest.
Don't they all lie?
They all lie some of the time, but not anywhere near the way Boris does with the serial lying and the lying to the former Queen. It's just, there was nobody he didn't lie to at some point that was important in this country.
You can have a view on that, no doubt. GBviews at gbnews.com. Nikki, let's have a look at something that really matters, and that's the situation in Nottingham. I mean, what you can say, what a week and all this. I'll tell you what it is. And it's not to take anything away from Ian Coates, who was 65 and a very well respected and loved
just about to retire.
But for me, it's when I see these two students, Barnaby Webber and Grace O'Malley Kumar, 19, finishing their first year of university, the beginning of their lives.
Yeah.
And that breaks my heart.
I know, at the beginning of the prime of their lives, right? You go to university, you've studied for years, you've worked so hard, your family has loved you and supported you to get you to that moment. And, heartbreaking doesn't cover it. It doesn't cover it at all. No. But what's kind of come out, what the papers are emphasising today is the fact that, the guy that actually committed these crimes was himself a Nottingham graduate from the engineering school. They talk about how Valdo Calacanis, I think his name is, and this paper talks about how his mum was a nurse, his dad was a carer, his brother went to Cambridge, his sister's very bright and still at school. This was not the background to somebody you might expect to go on and commit such a crime. And what I think has been underreported so far, and I hope it comes out sooner rather than later, is if there are serious mental health issues at play, that we hear more about those. And the reason I say that is because, young black men in particular are more susceptible to psychosis. It's pretty much the most serious condition you can have. I'm not saying there's any evidence to suggest he had that, but we really need to know more about his motives, why he acted as he did, because mental health doesn't get you off by any way, but it's very important to know what somebody is struggling and suffering with, because we've got to be able to spot if somebody is very much at breaking point, is poorly, is a risk to others. And we're just so appalling at that at the moment. I've had psychosis. It was absolutely terrifying. I was sectioned. This was years ago. I'm actually writing a book about it at the minute. But in that mindset, in that completely divorced from reality mindset, there's no telling what you could do. I know that, because I know where I went.
I was going to ask you, why, when we hear that somebody's had mental health issues, why sometimes in some people does that drive them to murder, to kill.
Because if you're having delusional voices, hallucinations, completely backwards thinking, which is I had all of those things, by the way. I mean, I thought I was going to have to kill myself before someone killed me, and I probably would have done with a few more weeks if I hadn't been sectioned. But the point is, you're just not thinking at all like anybody else is. So what becomes completely unbearable or unthinkable to us isn't if you're in, you know, a severe place of ill mental health.
Yeah.
And I think we lack that understanding at the minute as a society. We've got to try and get that across to people, although we still don't know in this particular case.
No, we don't.
I mean, as you say, it's not an excuse.
Of course not.
It's not an excuse.
No, but it could be a reason.
But if for nothing else, if it helps us spot these situations and prevent things in the future, that's got to be beneficial. I've got to ask you then, because I mean, I've known you a long time.
Yeah.
I didn't know anything about this.
Yeah.
How do you get a point? Because we often think with, I mean, things as severe as psychosis, that's just the way somebody is, and they may get treatment which will temper it or whatever.
Yeah.
But they're never going to get over it.
Yeah. Well,
so, I mean, where are you then? How does that work?
Yes, I mean, I've never had it since because I had what they call a single episode. So the NHS is very big on if you can treat somebody on a single episode, they may never have it again. If you don't, they will have it again multiple times in their life. So it's very, very crucial that you intervene at the beginning. I was actually sectioned in Australia where my family live. So I was treated under the Australian healthcare system, which was, in my opinion, just the most lucky thing ever for me because it was absolutely incredible. Then I came back to England and I was treated again by the NHS. Amazing team of outpatient psychiatrists that looked after me. But that's what it's to do with. And at the minute, you know, during the pandemic, cases of psychosis more than doubled. You know, the Charity Mind says as many as 1 in 100 people in their lifetime will have psychosis within the population of England and Wales.
It's not a shame talking about this. It must be very difficult.
Massive shame. And that's why I'm writing the book about it, because I know very few people that have ever admitted to me having it, and it's my job to talk about it.
It's almost impossible in this country to get anyone sectioned, isn't it?
Yes.
Almost impossible. So we probably aim to treat everybody as an outpatient, which, in your opinion, is good enough or not?
No.
Not good enough.
Sectioning is very important in certain situations because you are absolutely safe. The public is safe from you. You can be treated with certain meds. You know, they can override certain decisions. They can give you medicines that maybe you don't want to take, that you need. I can say this now looking back at the time. Of course, I thought my life was over and all my rights had been taken away from me. But actually, it was what I needed to get back to full health. Because if someone is so delusional, it doesn't matter what you say to them about what they need to do for the good of them. They're not going to do it.
No.
So that's the problem we've got.
It's fascinating.
It is,
And as we've got to point out, we don't know that this
But we don't know,
We don't know
exactly.
this is the case with this particular suspect, still just a suspect at this time. But it has been suggested. But, I mean, even if it's not the case here, it's an important thing to look at moving forward, I think.
Well, I think that's if you've lost a child, as they have, through this terrible violence, you've got to know why. You want to know why. Why did this happen? And it would be comforting, at least, if they could find out why.
Anyway, look, thank you both. We've got to leave it there for now. We'll catch up with you a little bit later on. Now, let's tell you about the people of Portland off the coast at Weymouth. They've been voicing concerns at plans to house a barge filled with migrants in their port. They say no one's consulted them and they're concerned about safety and the strain it will place on their resources.
Our South West of England reporter, Jeff Moody, has this special report for you.
It's a matter of days now before the Bibby Stockholm arrives in Portland with 500 men on board. Once they're on the barge, these men can come through these gates here and immediately they're in Portland itself. They're immediately in a residential area. They're now part of the community, they're part of the health service down here, and that's the problem.
There's no point in having an asylum process and checking to make sure people are safe in the country, not wanted for anything heinous in their own country, if you don't use this.
You know, they'd be given first priority to healthcare, transport, all the things have been taken away from us.
In an email seen by GB News, Portland's GPs say the migrants will have complex health needs and will need translators, doubling appointment times in an area already stretched to breaking point.
Portland Port as a business is absolutely despicable, completely immoral. So they have done a deal with the Home Office under the table Nobody knew about this, not even our councils, apparently, until it was signed, although I'm not sure how complicit they are, because they seem to have just rolled over and accepted that they are coming.
Never answered the second question.
In a fraught meeting last week, they addressed their concerns. They want to know why Portland Port, who they say stands to make a fortune from this, hasn't asked them what they think.
Their silence is deafening. They are saying nothing. They were the only party that did not turn up to the public forum meeting, and that speaks volumes to me. They need to be held accountable. And the people of Dorset won't give up. We will fight this.
In a statement, Portland Port told GB News, "We appreciate that there are some genuine concerns among local people. A great deal of work is taking place to ensure that the Bibby Stockholm is operated in a safe, secure and successful way, both for those on board the vessel and in the local community." Well, last week, the Archbishop of Canterbury lent his support, calling for a proper consultation with the locals. But no sign of that consultation. All the residents can do is look to what's happened elsewhere. They're looking at Newquay, where anti-fascism protesters were bussed in, calling the locals racist and fascist.
Those words, those terminologies are never on my mind. And yes, the community or those outside the community may say them, but we're simply looking at resourcing for the area, a lack of resourcing.
If it was women and children and families, we wouldn't need a barge because Weymouth and Portland would be opening up their homes for them, like we did with the Ukrainian refugees that came here last year. So there would be no need for a completely unethical barge.
Portlanders are now compiling an open letter to their MP, Richard Drax, demanding he work with them to stop the barge. They're determined to succeed, but as every day passes, that's looking less likely. All they can do now is steel themselves for what is to come. Jeff Moody, GB News.
Oh dear, yeah.
That, isn't it? We say things have got to be done, but you don't want them happening in your own backyard.
No, this is a problem. Older dads. Irene, hi Irene, says one of our sons is an older dad at 45.
I don't think that's old.
Well, it's not. I don't think it is these days, really. 45, it's... He's going to be around till his children are grown up, that's the thing. So I don't think that's too bad.
I had my last child at 44.
Did you?
Yeah.
Anyway...
I felt old doing it, but, you know, I'm still around.
It didn't put it off, but there were medical reasons for it. They adore their daughter and would have liked to have had a child earlier, but it didn't happen. Yeah, fair enough. Robert from Guildford said, I think it's selfish and irresponsible to have children after the age of 45. It can risk certain conditions like autism and Down syndrome, and particularly if the mother's older.
Yes.
And the ability to play with your kids is going to be reduced when you get into your 60s. That's actually a very valid point.
That's not 60s.
You're 60. You haven't got the energy. I mean, I haven't got the energy now that I had in my 20s.
When you were 40, but you've still got lots of energy to... Gosh, I've dragged my kids around Disneyland, well, past that, I think.
Oh,
yeah.
dear.
Look, ghosts. Have you ever lived with a ghost? Terry says, I have a ghost in my villa on the beach in Spain. The story goes that he was a deserter in the Spanish Armada, and he visits us quite regularly.
Yeah. Colin in Bridlington, we lived in a 400-year-old cottage. Talking to a neighbour one day who grew up in the house, said, I'll never come in after seeing a ghost as a child.
Oh.
It was a terrace house. Surely the ghost could go through the wall if it wanted to. We never saw anything.
Always wondered about that. Ghosts can presumably do what they want.
No, you think so. More on that and all of your thoughts coming up. This is GB News.
Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Good morning, a crackerjack of a day if you like it, warm and sunny, but there's an increasing chance of thunderstorms and the weather is more on the change through the weekend. Here's the reason why: an area of low pressure just ambling its way towards the UK, bringing more moisture, more humidity, and, as I said, an increasing chance of seeing some thunderstorms. For most, though, it is just a beautiful morning out there. Warm and sunny with light winds. A bit misty and murky around the coast of northeast Scotland. And the cloud is increasing further west as that low pressure approaches. 1 or 2 showers here and there this morning already, but for most, as I said, it's dry. It's this afternoon and through the evening where there's the greatest chance for Wales and northwest England, especially of seeing some heavy and thundery showers breaking out. For most, it just stays dry and very warm, temperatures in the mid to high 20s. But those thundery showers, where we do see them, could cause some disruption. A lot of rain falling in a short space of time.
Lots of lightning, even large hailstones falling. And they'll still be rumbling on well into the evening in the west. Elsewhere, it's going to be a fine, balmy summer's evening. But we'll see more of those heavy, thundery showers breaking out through the night and indeed into the weekend. Pretty warm and humid nights. Again, just like last night, parts of the northeast dropping down to single figures. But elsewhere, that humidity making it fairly difficult for sleeping, and that's going to be a feature of the weather through the weekend. It's going to be humid. It won't be as sunny. The sunshine will be fairly hazy during Saturday. Now, many places will again stay completely dry. It is chiefly in the west where we are looking at thunderstorms breaking out, but even here, they will be hit and miss, but they will again drop a lot of rain in a short space of time. Temperatures, well, mid-20s perhaps, but again, it'll feel just as warm because that humidity building. Again, a tricky night for sleeping into Sunday. Another warm and humid day. Yes, hazy sunshine, but more thunderstorms.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point. But boom.
And action.
Sergeant, read my superstar panel. They're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News. Britain's watching.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Good morning, it's 7 o'clock on Friday the 16th of June. Today, Tories in turmoil. Boris Johnson's allies fight for his political career as the Conservative Party tears itself apart.
Emotional scenes in Nottingham as thousands come together at a vigil for the victims of this week's knife and van killing.
Labour pledges to cut energy bills for good. How do you do that? And how much would it cost? We'll talk to the chair of the Labour Party this hour.
And as always, we bring you the latest weather updates.
Warm and sunny sums up the weather again for most today, but humidity is building and there's an increasing chance of seeing some thunderstorms becoming more widespread through this weekend. For a full forecast, join me later.
Morning to you, I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Ann Diamond, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
Graham in Coventry has been in touch. Hi, Graham. Says, in these times of financial hardship, I find it ridiculous the amount of money the government's still wasting on Boris and Partygate.
I bet it does cost money too.
Yeah, well, it will. I suppose they have, they've got to have fine things for MPs to do, don't they, these committees?
Well, I don't know.
There's loads of committees.
Our guest earlier was saying it's about protecting democracy and integrity in the House of Commons and all the rest of it. But it will be costing quite a lot of money.
Split on this. So Roy says Boris has been a disgrace. Our democracy is fragile enough without him, and worse people like his friends who believe they're above the rest of us. They all need expulsion from the Tory party.
And Richard reminds us that nobody has told a bigger lie, he says, than Blair to get us into Iraq. At least Boris got nobody killed. Well, people will argue that too, won't they? Did Blair suffer a biased inquiry? No.
He must have. Well, I mean, obviously there was all the inquiry,
yes.
the big inquiry, but was there must have been committee hearings and things. There must have been.
But nobody ever sort of thought it sounds like a hatchet job or this feels like a fix.
No, I guess the idea was though that. Oh, well, no, I retract that thought.
All right, let me take you on to mortgage rates, because this is terrifying.
I retract that thought.
Because a lot of people have been talking about mortgage rates going up and all the rest of it, and it's going to get as bad as the 80s, and then some rumours are saying it's going to be worse than the 80s. Yeah. Well, Darryl says, when we moved to Bournemouth in December 1984, our mortgage rate was 17.5%, and now people are moaning about 5%.
Ah, yes. I'll tell you what, Darryl, and I can't quote the exact figures, because it was months and months ago, but we had an expert on months ago saying that the problem with these comparisons is about our disposable income. And in terms of 17.5%, or those sort of high figures, are actually comparable to what we're spending now in terms of our income is dropping in real terms and all the rest of it. So, in fact, in terms of how much we're forking out for our mortgages, 17.5% and 5% or 6% are not that different.
So you're saying pay rates were that much worse then?
Oh, Tom Harwood is here.
He's got something to say on this.
It's because house prices have risen so much. So 17.5% on a much lower house price is a much smaller difference than 6% on a house price that's perhaps 10 times as high.
Yes.
The difference then is much, much larger.
But the 80s was a time, maybe a bit later, when house prices soared.
House prices really shot off in the 90s.
Yeah.
And that's when they sort of disassociated from income growth. But the really interesting thing there is how much more over-leveraged most people are. Most people now who've bought houses have mortgages of hundreds of thousands of pounds. That's something unimaginable back in the 80s. So 17% on a tens of thousands of pounds mortgage is a different beast than 5 or 6% on a hundreds of thousands of pounds mortgage.
Oh, you see, you're not just a once pretty face, Tom, are you?
I'm someone who's trying to buy a house.
There you go. There you go. Well, he's here to talk about Boris Johnson, as you would expect, and disingenuous to the point of being deliberately misleading. Oh, those are the damning words that the Privileges Committee used to describe Boris Johnson.
But the former Prime Minister branded those findings deranged, sparking a row amongst Tory MPs about whether or not to vote for this report.
So, let's see what Tom Harwood has to say about that one. I mean, this is... It's as we were saying yesterday, Tom, it's hugely damning, but in a way, is the Privileges Committee over-egged the pudding, in a way? They've almost given fuel to Boris Johnson, haven't they? Because it's hard to look at this and say they've not been a bit vindictive.
Well, I think this is a really interesting point, and to some extent Boris Johnson will be saying, look at this conclusion, look at this 90-day suspension, the second longest suspension recommended for any MP since the Second World War. 3 times the length of suspension recommended for Margaret Ferrier, the MP who ferried COVID to Scotland, back to London and Scotland again, who attended shops and gyms and spoke in the Commons and all the rest of it. She's now likely being kicked out as a result of a recall petition, but that was a 30-day suspension. They recommended Boris Johnson get a 90-day suspension.
Isn't that because he was Prime Minister? And because they want to reset the standards, maybe?
They do set out a whole list of aggravating factors, I should say, in their conclusion. And yes, they do say that the role of Prime Minister should be treated with perhaps more seriousness. But also, it's interesting, there are 5 individual sort of justifications for their sanction. And the first one is what they say deliberately lying to the House. But then there are 4 others that are all to do with how Boris Johnson behaved towards the committee, how they describe him sort of undermining the democratic process of the committee, supporters of his sort of campaigns against individual members of the committee.
They're punishing him extra for daring to criticise them.
So this is where Boris Johnson might have a bit of an argument here. It does seem that the committee has been rather introspective in how it's dealt with this punishment, because 4 out of those 5 reasons are all about how he behaved towards the committee and how important the committee is and how these individuals should be sort of beyond reproach, those sitting on the committee. It does seem very committee-focused, when only one of those 5 things was about actually what the committee was set up to look in the first place. But now we get to the crucial point, of course, which is the committee only recommends a sanction. And, of course, Boris Johnson has now stopped being an MP. He took the Chiltern Hundreds on Monday, which means he no longer sits in the House of Commons and no longer has the suffix MP after his name. So the sanction recommended, therefore, is not having a former member's pass. That pass offered to all former MPs to allow them to continue to access the parliamentary estate. This will be voted on now on Monday, but on a one-line whip. That means MPs don't have to turn up. And it'll be very, very interesting to see who turns up to vote against this sanction, who turns up to vote in favour of the sanction, and who finds perhaps convenient excuses to avoid turning up to work.
OK, but what does that say about those? And we already know there are some MPs who've already said they're going to disappear, abstain from this vote. And it looks like the Prime Minister may well do the same. Can Boris Johnson take that as a victory? Because it's hardly people being proactive towards him.
Yeah, I think the number of people who will be proactively voting against this will be very, very small. We've seen some, Brendan Clark-Smith, I believe Simon Clarke, Jacob Rees-Mogg have indicated that they might. I would be very surprised if this gets a number above sort of 20 votes. The more interesting thing is those MPs who might in their sort of heart of hearts want to vote for this sanction, who are influenced by their constituency parties. And within the Conservative Party base, within the membership of the Conservative Party, Boris Johnson is still supremely popular. And that is an awkward position for some MPs who are thinking, might we be deselected? Might our local parties make our lives difficult for us if we're seen to be vindictive against this person who is still so popular within that base of the Conservative Party? And that is what is perhaps going to shift the dial over the weekend. MPs go back to their constituencies, perhaps meet with their local parties. It's that pressure point that might change the mind of some MPs and might make them think, do you know what, I'm just not going to turn up to Westminster.
Well, why don't they just vote for him then? I mean, why? Because, I mean, I know you can say, well, I didn't vote against Boris Johnson.
I had something very, very important and long-standing and busy to do.
I mean, it's a weak argument. They could vote for him and against it. It's not going to change the actual dynamic now, is it, apart from having a former member's pass?
Whilst they technically could vote to reject the recommendations of the Privileges Committee, the last time that a government tried to do that, they got into a terrible, terrible mess. Remember the Owen Paterson scandal?
But they were whipped into that, weren't they?
They were, and Owen Paterson was recommended a sanction of over 10 days. That would have triggered the basis for a recall petition. Lots of MPs thought that was unjust, unfair. His wife, of course, sadly passed away through suicide, and there was a huge amount of compassion towards Owen Paterson. The government tried to sort of set up a parallel committee. They were completely upended by this sort of by this course. Trying to override the recommendations of the Privileges Committee is just an incredibly bad look. And when governments have tried to do this in the past, it usually becomes the case that sort of they trip up, fall over and then retreat. I think just looking at past precedents where individuals have tried to say, you know what, we're just not going to accept this year-long inquiry at all, it's just very unlikely to happen. And actually, this is what Boris Johnson's supporters have been saying in the past few weeks, when lots of people have been saying, oh, it doesn't matter, look, you have a majority in Parliament. How could this possibly be a vindictive committee when actually all these MPs could just say, no, we're not going to vote for it? It doesn't really work like that, because the sort of moral weight of this committee and the precedent on which it stands means that it's very, very difficult for MPs to vote against that committee.
You see, I do wonder with that then, I mean, whether you think Boris, and Ella Wheeler was sort of saying earlier on, whether you think Boris Johnson misled the House, even if you believe that is the case, the moral standing of the committee has been damaged by this, hasn't it?
Well, the chair of the committee, Harriet Harman, has been on record on a number of occasions to say Boris Johnson broke the rules and indeed lied to Parliament about it. That's before she became chair of the committee. And so there are some people, particularly supporters of Boris Johnson, who say this looks prejudicial. This doesn't look like a neutral arbiter of the facts. This looks like a prosecution case of 7 people setting out to find an outcome that they already believed. And then there was the other issue, which only came to light in the last couple of days, that of a senior member of the committee, one of the 7 who decide this, Bernard Jenkin, turns out serious allegations, which he has not explicitly denied, of him attending a lockdown Tier 2 breaching birthday party in the House of Commons in December 2020. And he might believe within himself that he thought he followed the rules, that perhaps he was with his work colleagues, one of them happened to be his wife, and yes, there might have been drinks there, but ultimately perhaps this fell in this grey area of was this a work event or was this a social occasion? And he might in his mind think that he was following the rules. But doesn't that then speak to what Boris Johnson might be thinking? And the grey area here is that no one knows what Boris Johnson was thinking at the time he said he thought he followed the rules.
That's what annoys me, is that there's never been... You can't really prove, unless he wrote something down, evidence that he knew he was misleading. And yet the committee report says he must have known, he must have known. We therefore conclude he must have known.
And the difficulty here, it's something that Boris Johnson actually cites in his fairly entertaining and lengthy response to the committee's report, is that the committee have found that and they go through in the report, in the 30,000-word report, they go through event by event by event. Most of those events, Boris Johnson was found to not have broken the rules at by the Metropolitan Police. There was one event where he was found to have broken the rules, that 20th of June birthday party in the Cabinet Room. It looked like a rather miserable birthday party, with orange juice on the table. And just as an
amongst
aside,
working colleagues.
the 3rd anniversary of that birthday party will be Monday's vote.
Right.
But what Boris Johnson says in his response is, well, the police found that lots of these events that you said I broke the rules at, the police found I didn't break the rules at. So clearly there's open to interpret... Different people are interpreting this in different ways. Doesn't that rather undermine the idea that you have got inside my head and determined that I was knowingly misleading the House?
Does this report, this committee report, does it stink?
Some people say that. Boris Johnson has called it a kangaroo court. Other people have said this is a committee full of respectable members of Parliament who've done a lot of work, who've taken a lot of evidence. But I think there are some questions in terms of how this was done, why the chair did not recuse herself, as indeed the previous chair, Chris Bryant, recused himself because of all of his statements. We then found out that Harriet Harman made many similar statements but didn't recuse herself. I think there are questions to ask, certainly, over how this was done and how some members of this committee have perhaps looked more vindictive in reaching that 90-day suspension than a process might in ordinary times.
OK. Tom, thank you.
No, I was just going to ask that one more point. So Boris Johnson no longer is an MP?
No longer an MP
as of Monday. It doesn't say Boris Johnson MP
as of Monday. So he announced his intention to resign on Friday at 8 p.m. and by lunchtime Monday he took the Chiltern Hundreds.
Yes. And what is the Chiltern?
Oh, that's what you have to do.
So there are MPs cannot actually resign. They're not allowed to, because they've been elected by the people. They serve their term. In order to then stop being an MP, you have to become something else. So there are these old titles that no longer really mean anything, that have existed in England for hundreds of years. The Steward of the Manor of Northstead and the Chiltern Hundreds. These are the two titles that sort of we go between in terms of MPs who resign. Now, interestingly, back in 2007, when Boris Johnson first resigned as an MP to become Mayor of London, he took the Manor of Northstead, and this time round he took the Chiltern Hundreds. One of the very few MPs to have taken both of these sort of mechanisms by which you can leave the House.
Just briefly on that, while we're still chatting on, I find it absolutely fascinating, I don't know about anybody else, that Nadine Dorries, who resigned first with immediate effect, isn't taking anything yet. She's decided she doesn't actually want to go just at the moment.
It's very interesting because, yes, she did use the words immediate effect, but also she does not want all of these by-elections to happen on the same day for Rishi Sunak to be able to cauterise that wound fairly swiftly. There's much speculation that she wants to delay this all until the autumn, perhaps until just before party conference, when there could well be a by-election loss for Rishi Sunak then, which would rather damage his leadership, which she now sees as a couple of posh boys stopping a working-class girl from Liverpool getting on in life and getting that seat in the House of Lords. She clearly thinks that this government has been acting with impropriety, and she wants to cause them harm. That's the speculation. But of course there is precedent. There are people who've announced their intention to stand down and don't do it for 6 months or so. There are some Labour MPs who've done that actually this Parliament.
OK. Tom, thank you very much indeed. Oh, we've got our money's worth out of you this hour, haven't we?
Our
Lovely
politics
stuff.
is almost becoming American now, isn't it?
It is
when
quite
you switch on
American.
the American channels and they're talking politics all the time, and it's so convoluted, and you just feel that we're going that way now as well.
Yeah, a little bit. Maybe we just know more about how it works. Don't know.
Learning more.
Anyway, we're definitely learning more. Now, from that to stuff that really matters and has really affected lives. And it's detectives now given more time to question a former student from the University of Nottingham over Tuesday's deadly knife and van rampage.
Now, yesterday saw the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, laying a wreath before a vigil was held in the city's Market Square for the 2 students and the school caretaker who all lost their lives.
Our national reporter, Ellie Costello, is in Old Market Square in Nottingham for us this morning. In that vigil, Ellie, must have been heartbreaking last night, but also important to show the city coming together.
Yes, good morning to you both. Heartbreaking and incredibly moving, but as you say, such a show of unity from the people of Nottingham. And for the benefit of our radio listeners, I'm in Market Square now, where that vigil was held last night, and up on the building behind us, the council building, it says #Nottingham Together, One City. And that is how many people are feeling this morning and this week after the events of Tuesday morning. They are united in grief together. And there were just beautiful scenes yesterday. Hundreds of people came into Old Market Square in order to pay their respects. There are hundreds of bouquets of flowers. There are Nottingham Forest shirts on the ground that have been signed. There are candles and letters that have been left as well. It is very, very moving reading through those. There are people on their way to work this morning. It is starting to get busier here in Nottingham, and there are many people stopping and reading those tributes and are visibly moved by what they see in front of them. But speaking at the vigil, we actually heard from Barnaby Webber's mother for the first time and Grace O'Malley Kumar's mother as well. We haven't heard them speak before, and also the sons of Ian Coates, the school caretaker who also lost his life in the early hours of Tuesday morning. They all spoke at that vigil last night. Let's have a listen to what they had to say.
Dealing with what's happened, we still haven't took it all in, so we just wanted to say a few things. My dad was an avid fisherman, he loved his family, and he also loved his forest. You read?
The monstrous individual who has shattered so many lives will not define us. And I know he will receive the retribution that he deserves. However, this evil person is just that. He is just a person. Please hold no hate that relates to any colour, sex or religion.
It just is truly so unfair. But I'll echo what my husband said yesterday. Be kind to each other, look after each other. Don't have hate in your hearts.
mean, many people will be listening to that and will be struck by the dignity of those families and the strength that they have. And a special mention as well to Grace O'Malley Kumar's brother, who must be a very, very young man himself, only a teenager. He spoke at that vigil last night and described Grace, his sister, as his best friend. It was very, very brave of him to speak in front of hundreds of people. And I know that many people here at the vigil last night left feeling very inspired by the bravery of their example, those very, very strong families that will have been crushed by the events of Tuesday morning. Now, of course, meanwhile, the investigation into what happened on Tuesday morning does continue. We know that the police have got an extended period of time now to question the man that is being held on suspicion of murder. They can now hold him for a total of 4 days, 96 hours. So that questioning will be continuing today. Nottinghamshire Police have also confirmed that it's referred part of the incident of Tuesday morning to the Independent Office for Police Conduct, and that is because a marked police car was following that stolen van that was being driven by the suspect before it collided with 2 pedestrians. So that detail was emerging yesterday, and we also had a new line yesterday that this suspect was a former student at the University of Nottingham, but it's not thought that that is any way connected to the attack. But this is such a strong student city. It's got a very large student population, and we know that the scenes that we've seen here in Old Market Square are very similar floral tributes at the University of Nottingham, and there's a flag at the university that is flying at half-mast, and many of the students have been commenting that this is such a heartbreaking way to end the academic year.
Isn't it just? Ellie, for now, thank you.
Absolutely terrible. Absolutely terrible. John has already emailed in and said, as a parent who has lost a child this year, he was killed, this is all bringing back the pain, watching those parents suffer, and the sons of Ian. My heart goes out to them, and I just hope that they really get the justice they deserve.
Yes, well, let's hope so. Now, still to come. How would Labour tackle the cost of living crisis? We're going to talk to the chair of the Labour Party, Annalise Dodds, very shortly. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians her task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6 is Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
7:27. Good morning to you. What are you up to today? What day is it? It's Friday. Last day of work for most of us then.
Yeah. You're looking forward to the weekend. You're going to do anything special this weekend?
Oh, yeah. Do let us know. This is Breakfast with Stephen and Anne, just in case you'd forgotten. Get in touch with us. We'd love to hear from you. GBviews at gbnews.com.
Now, the Labour Party claims the double whammy of poorly insulated homes and mortgage hikes is leaving homeowners paying an extra £3,500 nearly pounds per year.
Ouch. Now, Labour says the rollout of its Warm Homes plan to provide better insulation could be the answer, and it could cut your energy bill by hundreds of pounds.
Well, to discuss this and other things, I think, in more detail, let's speak to the chair of the Labour Party, Annalise Dodds. Good morning to you. I mean, we'll get on to some other things in a minute, but for the moment, it seems really crazy, as it's very warm at the moment, to be talking about winter and how we're going to have to think more about insulating our homes and making them more energy efficient. But I guess we've got to think ahead, isn't that true?
Well, that's right. And I think many homeowners actually are thinking about this right now because they're really concerned. They've seen their bills going up, of course. We've seen the price of food going up, the cost of fuel. Everything's getting more and more expensive. And, you know, Labour's really frustrated about this situation because the government has actually made the cost go up in many cases, made the cost of mortgages go up because of their failures with that mini budget. But they've also really failed to get a grip on home insulation. You know, when Labour left office, there were a number of programmes to help people to insulate their homes. We just saw those falling off a cliff when the Conservatives came into power. We've seen a huge drop-off in those home insulation programmes and those energy efficiency programmes. You know, Labour's been really clear. We know what works here. You know, when the Conservatives have tried to put programmes in, they've been big failures, often because they've outsourced them to huge companies that just don't understand what's going on the ground. Labour said we'd work with local authorities. We've got some really good examples from different parts of the country where they've been able to deliver that energy efficiency in local homes. We'd work with them and we'd get cracking and make sure that those 19 million homes that desperately need better energy efficiency actually got that with a Labour government. That's what we'd be doing now to get bills down.
Look, can I be absolutely honest with you? Because it's not a criticism of the scheme. Let's be clear. You know, insulation, more energy efficiency has got to be a really good thing. Can't knock it. But the sort of headline to all of this on your press release that the Labour Party's put out is all about, you know, tackling the cost of living crisis. And you kicked off by talking about huge mortgage rates and all the rest of it. If this shaves a few £100 off people's bills a year, that's a good thing. But actually, it's a drop in the ocean, isn't it? You need to be doing far more.
Well, absolutely. And Labour has announced other measures that we'd be taking right now to help with the cost of living crisis. And I'm very happy to talk about those in a moment. But I would say that actually, when we're talking about, in many cases, £500 that families would be saving, you know, not just 1 year, but for a number of years by putting these energy efficiency measures in place. That is a lot of money, and many families are counting every single penny at the moment. You know, again, they've seen some of these costs increase more than they had to because of actions the Conservative government has either taken or not taken. And Labour's never going to do that. We want to make sure that people are protected right now as they're facing that huge cost of living crisis.
When are we going to see, then, what you're saying, all piecing together to look like a really good manifesto with which to go into an election? Because there's no doubt we are now in that run-up, aren't we? We're in a run-up to the election. We don't know how soon it'll be. But we need to start to see all of these rather good ideas knit together into a manifesto, don't we?
Yes, we do. And of course, Labour is well on the way as part of that process. Keir has already announced his missions for government, the fact that we're not going to continue with the Conservatives' approach of short-term measures, announcements that are never followed up on and delivered. Instead, we're going to have those 5 big missions, long-term missions for government. Keir's announced a number of them. We're rolling those out. But we also already have conducted a policy review. That was finished by the time of our last conference. So we're well on that road. And what I would say the difference is between Labour and the Conservatives, we've got those clear solutions, but we're also long-term. You know, we don't want to be just making an announcement one day and then forgetting about it. I think energy efficiency is a really good example of that. We've had so many announcements from government, but actually the rate of these energy efficiency measures being put in UK homes, it's fallen off a cliff. The delivery has just not been there. Now, Labour's approach will be different. We know what works. We've looked at what's worked in different parts of the country, and we'll be building on that for the future.
Hold on a minute. With the greatest of respect, to say you don't want to unveil plans and then just see them disappear. I mean, the big plan, the huge plan for the Labour Party was the green prosperity agenda, wasn't it? I mean, that was how you were going to get more people into work, get the economy going, get growth going in our economy again, which would solve a huge swathes of problems that people are facing. And that's just been dropped.
I'm afraid it hasn't been, and it won't be dropped. Why? Because, as you said, it's absolutely critical for our energy security for the future, but also for those jobs of the future. Now, what some people say has changed the situation, which actually was always the case for Labour, was that we've been clear. We've got fiscal rules. Those fiscal rules are critical for all of the spending that we're going to undertake. You know, we've said for many months, in fact, well over a year now, Rachel Reeves has said that Labour will make sure that we will cost every single spending commitment, but also that we will make sure that debt is going down as a proportion of GDP, so as a proportion of our country's economic output. And Rachel has been very, very clear that every item of spending, as I said, is going to be consistent with those fiscal rules, because until we have that strong and stable economy, a strong and stable economy that we've not seen under the Conservatives, we're not going to be able to deliver that change that's so important for people. So we're absolutely committed to see that delivery of those new green jobs, but we're going to do that with a strong and secure economy. And of course, it's got harder to deliver that economy recently because of the crisis created by the Conservatives. But we're going to be upfront and honest with people about that.
Well, you say it hasn't been dropped, but what you're now saying is, well, you can't actually do it when you come to power. I mean, I was talking to Barry Gardner on Wednesday, and of course, former Shadow Secretary of State for Energy and Climate Change, and he was saying this is ridiculous. This is ridiculous. I need to speak to Rachel about this because we should be cracking on with it if we get into power.
Well, we are, but we're also being completely crystal clear with the public that we're not going to say, in a situation where the Conservatives have crashed our economy, that we won't prioritise getting that economy on a strong and stable footing. It's absolutely right for Rachel Reeves to do that. We are determined to deliver on that climate investment pledge. But what Rachel said was, because of the damage that's been done to the economy, we're not going to be able to put that in place immediately. We are going to have to build up to it, but we are determined to deliver on it absolutely as soon as we can, and certainly within the phase of a first period of Labour government. And why have we said that? Because our country needs those jobs of the future, we've not seen them being prioritised by the Conservatives. And as you'd expect, I talk with a lot of businesses. They're really frustrated because right now they're seeing jobs that could be coming to our country, going to other countries. It's not just because of the fact that the Conservatives don't have anything like Labour's climate investment pledge. It's because the Conservatives don't have an industrial policy either. It's because they don't have a long-term plan for taxation like Labour does, getting rid of business rates. There's no long-termism from the Conservatives, and that's really costing our country jobs.
As chair of the Labour Party, what do you make of what's happening within the Tories at the moment? And particularly, what do you think of the Privileges Committee report? Do you think it was out to get him?
Well, quite the opposite, actually. And of course, there was a majority of Conservatives on that report, more Conservatives than Labour MPs sitting on that committee that produced that report. It was one that was conducted very carefully, and I think its findings are damning. And they really indicate that Boris Johnson was a lawbreaker, but also that he was a liar, that he misled Parliament. Now it's down to Rishi Sunak to actually show some backbone. He's not shown backbone on this so far. The taxpayers picked up Boris Johnson's legal bill. Rishi Sunak has shown himself to be unwilling to stand up to egos in his party until now. Well, what he needs to do is to be really clear that he will make sure there's a vote on that report next week, that he's actually going to stand up to Boris Johnson. He shouldn't, of course, have approved Boris Johnson's honours list either, knowing about all of that law breaking, when, of course, he was right next to Boris Johnson for a lot of that time when he was serving as Chancellor. So, really big questions for Rishi Sunak over this. And as I said, he's got to show some backbone. We've got so much psychodrama still in the Conservative Party when it should be focused on delivering the people's priorities.
Was Chris Bryant, as chair of that Privileges Committee, right to recuse himself because of things he'd already said about Boris Johnson? Was he right to recuse himself? And if so, why didn't Harriet Harman for saying basically the same things?
Well, actually, the membership of that Privileges Committee, and of course it's a body of Parliament, that membership was actually approved by Parliament. OK, so all MPs supported that. That included Conservative MPs, and of course there's a majority of Conservative MPs in the House of Commons. So this really is a case, I'm afraid, of Boris Johnson trying desperately to find some kind of reason for him to knock the conclusions of the report. But there isn't a reason. This was conducted absolutely according to the rules. And what Boris Johnson should do is really look at why he misled Parliament at that time. He should consider the impact of all of this on those families who followed the rules, often at huge personal cost. And he should also, frankly, pay back to the taxpayer all of the money that every single one of us have been paying into his legal fund. And as I said, Rishi Sunak needs to actually stand up to Boris Johnson for once on this.
OK. Annalise Dodds, good to talk to you this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
That wasn't exactly an answer to your question, though, was it?
No.
No,
but sometimes
we're never going to get one. It's worth trying.
It's as good as you get sometimes.
Oh, it is, isn't it?
I'm sure you've got a view on that. gbviews@gbnews.com.
Up next, Rishi Sunak's pledge to clear asylums can't be done. We'll take a look through the papers with Nikki Hodgson and Ella Whelan.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Fridays from 8, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views, and often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
7:43 morning to you. This is Breakfast with Stephen and Anne.
You nearly didn't make it back into your chair.
I was stretching my leg. I've broken a toe.
Oh, I've forgotten you'd broken a toe.
Yeah, I've broken a toe, and as a result, I'm holding my feet differently and I can't get comfortable.
What did you bash your toe into?
Onto the bed.
Oh, a foot of the bed?
Yeah.
Oh, that's really painful.
But I can't. I just can't get comfortable sat down.
No.
Because I don't know what to do with my legs.
If he gets up and wanders around a bit, well, let's just pretend we don't notice. Time to go through the papers now. Joining us this morning, author Nikki Hodgson and journalist Ella Whelan. And we're starting, Ella, with, in the Times, Rishi Sunak's pledge to clear asylum claims.
Yes, and the claim that it can't be done. And not just that it can't be done, but in fact that there is the potential for Rishi Sunak's pronouncements on the issue to have an effect on creating even more of a backlog. I'm sure some of GB News viewers will have seen him looking slightly odd in an immigration vest doing a raid the other morning when all the current Boris Johnson news broke. He was busy with officers bashing down some poor person's door, saying that he was getting on top of the backlog. But in fact, his focus is on all the previous cases, and there is a suggestion in the Times and some of the other papers that means that there will be an influx of new cases, and then they won't be able to get on top of that. So it's a kind of a never-ending issue, and the Times goes into some of the detail on that. So some of the problem is that the National Audit Office found that some of the problem is the way in which caseworkers are dealing with this. So actually they found that a fifth of caseworkers who are working on cases are not fully trained, and so then aren't able to, in the full extent, be able to deal with those cases, and so they get left. There's also, we know that there's been an issue with cases being mishandled, simple things like filing not being done properly, and so then people get forgotten. But also just the scale of the cost of what it has cost to put people up in hotels. This is running into the kind of billions of pounds, 2.2 billion last year, most of it attributed to the money that it costs to put people up in hotels, and no bigger plan as to how to deal with this in a more sensible fashion, whether it's sort of building permanent accommodation that doesn't look or feel like a prison, you know, something that is actually sensible and workable.
How much is all that going to cost, though?
Well,
that's the thing.
Well, that's the thing, but it's about, you know, I think the problem with Rishi Sunak and this particular government and Suella Braverman is that they're being far too boosterish about this issue, and they keep saying, don't worry, we've got it sorted, when it's plain as day to everybody that they haven't. And the fact of being boosterish and not having a long-term plan or getting serious about the kind of law around this means that the backlog will continue to grow, but also people continue to suffer, because we know that this is causing strife in communities where people are just being planted and hotels are being filled up. You know, there is this constant route. I know that you've covered it on GB News before, about the fact that in some, you know, deprived areas where homeless people aren't able to get a house, but then suddenly migrants are being put up in hotels, it causes tension within communities. That's not good. But also, it's not good for those individuals who are illegally or whatever coming to this country to be holed up in a hotel for months and months on end, not allowed to do anything, and you know, part of a kind of tense discussion. So it is really rather depressing.
Yeah,
is the conclusion
it is depressing. There's no two ways about it. Can we have a look? I want to get this out of the way, if you don't mind. You know what I'm talking about.
I do.
I want to get it out of the way. It's in the Telegraph. It's about C-section babies. Sunroof babies, as you call them.
Sunroof babies.
And how to protect them
Well, you're
from
talking
ADHD.
to two sunroof mums.
Oh,
Yes,
both
we've both had C-sections. So, as we've discovered in the green room. Anyway, I think it's okay to say that.
Caesarean section babies, yes.
Yes, mine was planned. I wanted it. It was the birth that I wanted. It was fantastic. I recommend it to everyone. Right. So that's my opinion on it. But basically, this is to do with a study that's been done in China of a very small number of babies, 72. That's not enough. That's not enough to draw a conclusion. And apparently the C-section babies that were doused in their mother's vaginal fluid then have a lower risk of having ADHD. There's a lot...
Do they have a higher risk if compared to natural births?
Well, it doesn't go into any detail around that.
That's a problem.
So, you know, we hear so many negative stories about C-sections and the things that babies don't develop, you know, bacteria they don't develop basically from not going through the birth canal.
Is that right?
That's what we get told is one of the risks.
Not right, Anne.
I mean, it's one of the things we get told. My baby, I mean, touch some wood, but she's strong as nails. She hasn't been sick since the day she's born. She's 4 months next week. She's absolutely fine. Good. She had a really simple, straightforward birth, and I think that was better for everybody, personally. But what's really bizarre about this study is they don't really know what the link is. That's what they're saying. Right. But they think maybe that actually, if you put this flora and fauna on babies when they're born, it somehow helps with neurodivergence. I do not understand. That doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, I'm not a scientist.
Let's face it, they're not very long in the birth canal, unless it's an unbelievably awful birth.
No.
They're not very long there anyway, and the minute they're out, they're usually clean.
Yes, and
fast.
Your brain is developing far before that, you know. I mean, aren't neurodiverse conditions already, you know, partly formed?
Maybe not.
Well,
maybe not.
We just had a really amazing conversation about this in the green room with one of the lovely GB News producers who works as a midwife, and she was talking about the fact that there is this trend among women to do a thing called sweeping, I think it is, where you take the stuff, let's not do it too early in the morning, and rub it on the, if you have a C-section, rub it on the child's
to be specific,
face.
This is the fluid that's in the birth canal.
This is, they take a vaginal swab and then place that on the baby. Use the word smear. It really does sound that kind of, it's that graphic, on the baby's face in order to give them the kind of whatever bacteria that they need. And actually, she was telling us that there is a large risk of some very serious infections that can take place, including strep, which can mean that your baby is on antibiotics, which is something nobody wants very early in life. But the interesting thing about this is you have to ask, why are these studies taking place? There is such a focus at the moment on, there was, 2 weeks ago or a week ago, there was breastfeeding and GCSE results. There is just this suffocating pressure at the moment on mothers to say, from the minute they are born, everything you do depends on whether they get good GCSEs or whether they get ADHD. Right. Yeah. And my God, is this oppressive for women? So I think it's interesting to ask,
it's another way of punishing women all the blinking time.
Why are these stories coming out?
It really is.
Well, I was going to have a croissant, but I've gone right off.
OK. Shall we? Let's move on then.
I'll pick one quick.
All right, well, I was going to go to Ella. What do you fancy doing? You've got student loans.
Let's do... Well,
or you've got The Guardian banning gambling ads.
Let's do The Guardian, because I think this is really interesting. So The Guardian has decided to ban all of its gambling ads across all of its online content and newspapers. That goes for, anything to do with scratch cards or sporting events or anything like that. And they are making the argument that essentially they're saying that it's a sort of evil industry that does harm to people, and so we're going to find our revenue from other places. Whatever, that's the Guardian's decision. But the article underneath it looks at the way in which approaches to gambling have changed. So it details about the fact that since the 2005 Gambling Act that Blair brought in, there has been, more freedom within the gambling industry to be able to target people. It talks about the fact that, gambling companies hone in on VIP people who gamble a lot, and so they get them to gamble more. And there's a lot of sort of, as you might expect, they want to make a profit, and so that they target people. The solution to problem gambling, and they sort of go into the detail of how many there is. Some people say it's 0.4% population, then some people say it moves up to more like 8% of the population, because you can't really ever know homeless people, people who are off the grid, how much they gamble. But the solution here that The Guardian comes to, or at least government is now suggesting, is bans, to ban gambling. And then it opens up an interesting question. I'm not for banning gambling. I'm also not a gambler. And I think most people of us can sympathise with problem gambling. That's a terrible thing that ruins families and ruins lives. But it's a bit like anything else with smoking or drinking or things that are bad for us. Do we need the state to come in and intervene and stop us from doing those things? Or is that an imposition on people's personal freedom? Because another way of looking at it is if you don't have much money and you, as my father always did, play the lottery, he always played the lottery every week, it's a way of imagining or hoping that you might get more money or you might have a different kind of a life. And there's something kind of romantic and aspirational about that.
But it's when you see that... I remember when the lottery started, seeing people who, like in a summer field, I don't know if they exist anymore,
yes, they do.
But people queuing up and spending 20, 30, 40 pounds on tickets every week.
And then that's why we call it a tax on the poor, isn't it? I mean, that's what it has been called. I mean, the problem for me with gambling is that its addictive quality works the same that drugs do. It works on the dopamine system in the brain, and if you are prone to addiction, then you really probably shouldn't gamble. And that's the issue. You can't see from looking at somebody who might be prone to it.
But rather like smoking, and there were these debates about that, could we not just stop any form of advertising for gambling?
Well,
yeah, because then people are going to do it anyway, right? That's what we always say, like taking drugs. So, yeah, I mean...
Whenever I see an advert for gambling, I always... it's slightly disturbing. That.
Yeah,
it's one thing
I'm
to
not
have gambling,
for it.
It's another to push it to people.
But people say, people say that about... People are now saying that about junk food, that they're... And the suggestion behind it is, particularly, and this is always, aimed at working class people, if I'm to be crude, working class people are such sheep that they watch adverts and then they go and do it. Or they watch adverts, they go and eat crisps. They watch adverts, they go and play.
Yeah, but adverts must work, otherwise people wouldn't pay for them.
Of course they do work, but I think we always forget the element of individual agency in all of this, which is that I think there's so much more, like Nikki said, so much more complex things going on with problem gamblers.
Not if you're prone to addiction of any sort.
Oh, well, on that note, you lot are all prone to talking, and I need to stop you in your tracks. Thank you both. We'll catch up with you a little bit later on. Chaos in the Conservative Party. Tory MPs split over this whole Partygate inquiry. We'll bring you more very shortly. This is GB News.
Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Good morning, a crackerjack of a day if you like it, warm and sunny, but there's an increasing chance of thunderstorms and the weather is more on the change through the weekend. Here's the reason why: an area of low pressure just ambling its way towards the UK, bringing more moisture, more humidity, and, as I said, an increasing chance of seeing some thunderstorms. For most, though, it is just a beautiful morning out there. Warm and sunny with light winds. A bit misty and murky around the coast of northeast Scotland, and the cloud is increasing further west as that low pressure approaches. One or two showers here and there this morning already, but for most, as I said, it's dry. It's this afternoon and through the evening where there's the greatest chance for Wales and northwest England, especially, of seeing some heavy and thundery showers breaking out. For most, it just stays dry and very warm, temperatures in the mid to high 20s. But those thundery showers, where we do see them, could cause some disruption. A lot of rain falling in a short space of time. Lots of lightning, even large hailstones falling. And they'll still be rumbling on well into the evening in the west.
Elsewhere, it's going to be a fine, balmy summer's evening, but we'll see more of those heavy, thundery showers breaking out through the night and indeed into the weekend. Pretty warm and humid nights, again, just like last night. Parts of the northeast dropping down to single figures, but elsewhere, that humidity making it fairly difficult for sleeping, and that's going to be a feature of the weather through the weekend. It's going to be humid. It won't be as sunny. The sunshine will be fairly hazy during Saturday. Now, many places will again stay completely dry. It is chiefly in the west where we are looking at thunderstorms breaking out, but even here, they will be hit and miss, but they will again drop a lot of rain in a short space of time. Temperatures, well, mid-20s perhaps, but again, it'll feel just as warm because that humidity building. Again, a tricky night for sleeping into Sunday. Another warm and humid day. Yes, hazy sunshine, but more thunderstorms.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good morning to you. It's 8 o'clock on Friday, the 16th of June. Today, civil war in the Conservative Party. Tory MPs split over the Partygate report as Boris Johnson's allies fight for his political career.
And emotional scenes in Nottingham as thousands come together at a vigil for the victims of this week's knife and van rampage.
And the first test of the Ashes kicks off today as England hoping to win their first series on home soil since 2015.
And as always, we'll bring you the latest weather update.
Warm and sunny sums up the weather again for most today, but humidity is building and there's an increasing chance of seeing some thunderstorms becoming more widespread through this weekend. For a full forecast, join me later.
Good morning to you. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Anne Diamond, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
Yeah, we've had some fascinating emails this morning, and we're actually yesterday on the show, we were talking to Lucy Beresford, the psychologist, and she was saying when it comes to all this Boris Johnson hoo-ha and politics in general, and in fact lots of our life nowadays, we're very black and white. People are either pro or anti. There's no middle ground. There's no grey anywhere, which isn't realistic, actually.
We criticise grey, though, don't we? We say, oh, you're sitting on the fence.
Yeah, but we shouldn't do, should we? Because we can all change our minds or delve into it all a bit more. Brian's been in touch on Boris Johnson, and he makes a really good point. He says there are many, many people in this country who do not buy any part of this report. Though we're not fans of Boris, we are fans of fairness. We don't believe he lied. We just think he was daft enough to think he was within the rules. Now, you may or may not agree with that, but it's an interesting point, Brian.
But isn't that what we do here? And what I think isn't done on a lot of TV programmes and radio news programmes particularly, is that we sort of discuss all points, but in a friendly manner. You don't have to throw things at each other, do you?
Yeah.
I mean, you can get quite heated, but you can. I think with the Boris Johnson thing, you can see all points. Actually, it makes it very difficult to come to any conclusion.
Yeah, but of course the Privileges Committee did come to a conclusion. They said that Boris Johnson was disingenuous to the point of being deliberately misleading. That's what they said in that report released yesterday.
But Boris Johnson branded those findings deranged and has now sparked a row amongst Tory MPs about whether or not to vote for that report.
Let's talk to former Chief Secretary to the Treasury, David Mellor, who's here. Morning, David.
Morning. I'm looking at this. What should I throw at you? I think you'd look great with that pot of yellow flowers attached to your hair.
Oh, do you?
Yeah, I'm thinking so. Give me a reason to chuck it at you.
Oh, all right. Well, I might well do. You never know. What do you make of all of this? I mean, look, I know you're not Boris's biggest fan, but with all that, you can't help but look at the report and think, well, whatever he did, haven't they been a bit vindictive, politically motivated in a response?
I think Boris excites attention, either good or bad. Boris has had a lot of good attention, and now he's getting bad attention. But look, I've been looking through some of the notable bits of this report, and when you read this, and don't forget, this committee, they're not, as it were, well, one or two of them are, but generally they're not proven enemies of Boris. In fact, one of the things that I find rather extraordinary, the Tories, so I'm sure, nice people, kind to old ladies, help, nice to animals, but, basically they weren't like big people, and yet they have gone for him in a way that's rather extraordinary. I mean, you quoted a bit of it, but I think it's worth going back to it. We came to the view, this is the committee, that some of Mr. Johnson's denials and explanations were so disingenuous that they were, by their very nature, deliberate attempts to mislead the committee and the House, while others demonstrated deliberation because of the frequency with which he closed his mind to the truth. That's an awful indictment, and it's very difficult how it can ever be glad, confident morning again with Boris.
But in terms of some of these relate... I mean, there was one time and he was found to have broken the rules by the Metropolitan Police and was fined. But some of this refers to times when, actually, the Metropolitan Police said he actually hadn't broken the rules.
I think what we're dealing with here, I mean, when I think of the police, I think of Brendan Byrne, There's no situation so terrible that a policeman can't make it worse. So we don't want... as far as I'm concerned, the police should have nothing to do with this. This is the House sitting in judgment on one of their colleagues. And, when you think what their verdict was, what they found was he deliberately misled the House. He deliberately misled the committee. He'd breached confidences. He'd impugned the committee. They obviously don't like that. They feel that if the House is to regulate itself, it should be treated with respect in the process of doing so. And that's obviously got to them. The disrespect. I mean, look, I built a career on being disrespectful about people, so I'm not going to criticise Boris for that. But it's rubbed salt in the wound and being complicit, they say, in the campaign of abuse and attempted intimidation of the committee. And to me, the interesting thing is this the end for Boris? I mean, Boris plainly will make a fortune doing his lectures and after-dinner speeches, and I gather he's going to be a columnist for the Mail and all the rest of it. Boris isn't going to go away, but as Boris finished as a political figure, and then can Sunak come back from this? You see, what I think is so selfish of Boris is that he hasn't really given any thought, because Boris doesn't think about anyone other than Boris. He hasn't really thought about what are the consequences for the Conservative Party. I mean, they've got less than 18 months to get their act together. Sunak is capable of being believed, is a man of integrity and capability. He may not be a great shining star in the charisma stakes, but very few people could say, that's Sunak, I don't trust him, you know, he's a liar and all the rest of it. But what, if you were Rishi Sunak now, or we were Rishi Sunak's advisors, could we really say to him, you're going to have 18 months, 15 months in which you can actually make something of this? Because Boris is going to be crawling out of a hole every week.
Yeah, he's a comeback man, isn't he? He's come back several times. He can do it. But he wouldn't want to do it in opposition. I can't see Boris wanting to be a leader of opposition. Can you?
No, but I think when you say he can come back, you see, there was a time, and a lot of Boris's fans, and, you know, I am berated by a number of Boris's fans, particularly on this station, that, you know, I'm disrespectful to him. But the reality is that Boris... They always tell me about when Boris won this and when he won that. But what people think of public figures changes. And I really feel now that Boris has blown away his credibility with so many of the public that he can never really be what he once was. And the fact that some people still, you know, worship the flame doesn't mean that he's really a credible future political leader. And your point is, if he's not going to be a political leader, why would he want to hang about?
Because he still loves the world of politics and because he still wants it.
Yes, but look, you just
I mean, Churchill is his hero. Churchill came back.
But Churchill, once Churchill got the chance to come back, and don't forget, Churchill wasn't isolated because, you know, of his misbehaviour. Churchill was isolated because people weren't ready for what Churchill had to say. But when Churchill got his chance to come back, didn't he do well, to coin a phrase? Trouble with Boris is that he wins a majority of 80. Well done him. No one else could have done it. But then it's like he sits back and instead of delivering on Brexit, getting rid of all those tatty old bits of legislation that just kept us still stuck like a butterfly on a display board. We're still stuck with all pinned to the board with all of what they're saying, what the EU rules are. Boris, instead of sweeping all that away, it seems like the detail he just can't cope with. He doesn't want. But you know, a lot of people don't do detail. Ronald Reagan didn't do detail.
But they delegate to people who can.
That's the point. I was going to say exactly that. You know, I used to go to America quite a lot during Ronald Reagan's time. Ron was the chairman of the board, and there were people like Jim Baker, one of the best guys I've ever met, still going strong. People like him, they could pick up the wheels of government and pedal them in any direction and do so well. Why couldn't Boris find such a person?
Well, he do well. Well, where does this leave the vote on Monday? Because that's the big decider. These are recommendations. It has to go through the House. It's going to get passed, isn't it? But
overwhelming.
Yeah, but where does this leave? I mean, not the rebellion, if you like, or the people backing Boris Johnson, but the abstentions is going to be interesting to watch, isn't it?
It may be, but you see, personally, I think that Boris is finished.
Politically?
Yeah. Oh, he won't be finished that. He'll be able to buy, carry as many houses in this country as he wants. Because as far as people are concerned, Boris coming along and saying terrible things about all his colleagues, that's box office. But does that really amount to a legitimate exercise and a sensible exercise of his political talent? What a shame. It could have been so different. I mean, I think Boris is a tragedy. It's a tragedy because he had all of the skills needed to become a great prime minister, except the one that he really needed, the ability to be useful to the people of this country. It's like Boris wanted to be world king, as I think he said when he was a kid, but he didn't. In order to become world king, he had to do something more than just express his opinions, and he's never managed to do that.
OK. David, got to leave it there. Good to see you, as always. Thank you.
No, that's one for you, because I feel like saying I think he could still come back, but it would be a long time, and whether he's got the patience to stay back in the shadows and build a
I don't, because you're looking 5 years,
at least,
possibly 10.
Possibly.
And
so he's got to play the long game.
The world will have changed too much by then, I think.
We'll still need colourful figures in politics, won't we?
Yeah, but he'll be a.
He won't be that old.
One of the old guard by then, and not we'll have bright young things.
Well, one hopes so.
By then.
One prays so, don't you? Give us your view anyway. GBviews at gbnews.com.
Now, let's bring you up to date with some other stories at 12 minutes past 8. And popular family meal items have gone up by 27% in the last year, according to Which. It says people pay between 60 and 80 pence more for items like pasta bake, beans and fish fingers. The company also says your typical Sunday roast has gone up by 13%.
The former Prime Minister Liz Truss has told GB News exclusively that she is still determined to fight for Conservatives' values. In her first major television interview since leaving Downing Street, she told Dan Wootton that some MPs do not understand how to improve people's lives across the country.
The National Audit Office says the government has a long way to go to meet its asylum backlog goal. It claims it would take 2,200 decisions a week to clear it by the end of the year. Currently, 1,130 weekly decisions are being made. The Home Office says it's working non-stop to reduce the asylum backlog.
And a group of MPs have concluded that energy bill support took too long to reach those most in need. The Public Accounts Committee found around 1.7 million people were left waiting for months for help due to the government's lack of bandwidth to ensure all groups received support at the same time. It says the government must now make it clear how it's going to protect consumers from future price rises.
Now, detectives have been given more time to question a former student from the University of Nottingham over Tuesday's deadly knife and van attack.
Yesterday saw the Home Secretary Suella Braverman lay a wreath before a vigil was held in the city's Market Square for the two students and the school caretaker who lost their lives.
Well, our national reporter Ellie Costello is in the heart of Nottingham for us this morning. And what really striking people, Ellie, was this remarkable show of strength from all the families devastated by this.
Absolutely, it was a show of dignity and a show of strength, wasn't it? Yesterday at that vigil, about 6 p.m, there were hundreds of people filling Old Market Square here in Nottingham, which is where I'm stood now. It's where we heard that the families, the mothers in particular, speak for the first time. Grace O'Malley Kumar and Barnaby Webber, both just 19 years old when they lost their lives on Tuesday morning. Their mothers speaking for the first time last night, being so brave in doing so. And also the sons of Ian Coates, the school caretaker, who was only a few months off retirement. We heard his son speak for the first time last night at that vigil as well. Let's have a listen to what they had to say.
Dealing with what's happened, we still haven't took it all in. So we just wanted to say a few things. My dad was an avid fisherman, he loved his family, and he also loved his forest, the rest.
The monstrous individual
who has shattered so many lives, will not define us. And I know he will receive the retribution that he deserves. However, this evil person is just that. He is just a person. Please hold no hate that relates to any colour, sex or religion.
It just is truly so unfair. But I'll echo what my husband said yesterday. Be kind to each other, look after each other. Don't have hate in your hearts.
Anyone would think that the events of Tuesday morning would have torn Nottingham apart, but all I can see is a city that has come together in the wake of these events. I want to show you the scene now outside the council house, which is just at the front of Market Square. You can see the hundreds of bouquets that have been left here in the past few days. They are just being moved along so that they don't disrupt the pavement. You can see that happening here, but there are balloons. There's a beautiful pink balloon here that says Nottingham choose love, which is reminiscent of the words of the mothers that we just heard speaking there, telling people to choose love, to look after each other, to not give in to hatred. There's also football shirts here, Nottingham Forest football shirts, because we know that Ian Coates was a very big football fan, and his sons yesterday asked people to wear Nottingham football shirts. Many people turned out in red in order to do so, and you can see people stopping here on their way to work to pay their respects. This city is totally shocked by what happened here on Tuesday, and we'll continue to see those sorts of scenes, I'm sure, in the next few days. Well, of course, as the city grieves, the investigation into what happened on Tuesday morning continues. We now know that the police have longer to question the suspect that is currently being held on suspicion of murder. He can be held now for a maximum of 4 days or 96 hours. So that questioning will be continuing today. And we also know that Nottinghamshire police have confirmed that they've referred part of the incident, part of the events of Tuesday morning, to the Independent Office for Police Conduct. Now, that is because a marked police car was actually following the stolen van that the suspect was driving at the time when it collided into two pedestrians. So that detail was emerging yesterday, and we also understand now that the suspect was also a former student at the University of Nottingham, but it's currently not thought that that is in any way related to the attack on Tuesday. But what was so striking at that vigil last night was the hundreds of students who turned out in their university sports kits, because we know that Barnaby and Grace were both very, very keen athletes, and Nottingham is a city with a large student population, and many of them have been remarking that this is such a heartbreaking way to end the academic year.
OK, Ellie, thank you.
Yes, absolutely heartbreaking when all of those kids should have been enjoying themselves and going to end-of-year parties and everything else, and suddenly it's a town in mourning. And as the families reminded us as well yesterday, it isn't only Nottingham that feels very much in mourning, it's the places those families have come from too. Yeah. I mean, everyone who knew them or feels they knew them, utterly devastated, still can't get over it.
Dreadful situation. That investigation continues, as Ellie was saying, and we'll keep you up to date as and when there are any developments on that. It's 19 minutes past 8. Still ahead, England face Australia as the Ashes start today.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel. Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Fridays from 8, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now? Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 8:23. Good morning to you. This is Breakfast with Stephen and Anne. Good to have you with us.
Have we got time for a quick ghost story?
Go on then.
Because I was asking earlier if you've ever seen a ghost and would you be put off buying a house if it was known to have a load of ghosts? There's a big place in Dorset going up for 6.5 million. If you fancy it, but it's got a whole stable of ghosts, and some of them sound pretty nasty. Anyway, Thompson has emailed and said, when I was a Chesterfield bus driver, we had a service that came in from Staveley to Chesterfield bus station. If there were passengers on, you would continue up Chatsworth Road. But on this morning, I looked down the bus and no passengers. And when I looked through the periscope to see upstairs, there was one woman passenger. So I had to set off. Further on. When I got to the final stop, I looked and she wasn't around. Thinking she may have fallen asleep, I went upstairs to wake her. When I got there, she wasn't there. I came back downstairs, looked in the periscope, and she was there. So I drove back to the bus station, and as I neared the station, she disappeared. Now, I never saw her again, but all the other drivers said they'd seen her too. Ooh, the lady on the bus.
Lady on the bus. You see, I don't know if I believe in ghosts, are they after shadows or something? I mean, I don't know.
Presence.
It's interesting.
Sometimes people see things, or claim they do, or sometimes people say they feel a sensation.
You see, I don't think Thompson's making... You see, people do make things up, but I don't think Thompson's making that up.
No, that's weird.
So you've seen something. What it is, I don't know.
But you do get these stories of car drivers, don't you, who say they see somebody in the back of the car And then they
Do they?
disappear. Yeah, whenever they
that'd
go through.
freak me out.
That would freak me out, especially if you're driving.
Oh.
Anyway, if you've got a ghost story for us, not too silly, please, a real one. It's gbviews@gbnews.uk, if it can be a real one.
Now, the first test of the Ashes starts today. England looking to win their first Ashes on home soil since 2015, taking on Australia, of course, at Edgbaston.
So no pressure there. Aidan McGee's here. It's a big day, isn't it, in cricket?
Oh, no, hold on a minute. Hold on.
Oh, we're going to Jack Carson first.
Yes, we are.
Oh, we're going. We're going.
Sorry,
to our...
yeah, wait.
Yeah, he was ready, bated breath. Yeah, we're going to our West Midlands reporter Jack Carson, who is, of course, in Edgbaston. Hey. And is the atmosphere building already?
Good morning. Good morning. Well, it very much feels like quiet before the storm here at Edgbaston. A few people starting to turn up. We've got somebody that's selling flags, selling hats and sunglasses. I am very tempted to buy a hat this morning because it's already very hot and it's only 8:30 in the morning. But of course, it's the first test of the Ashes today, and well, England are looking to bounce back after what could only really be described as a bit of a capitulation in the last Ashes 18 months ago. They lost 4 of the tests and drew 1 to Australia. But since then, there has been big change in the England side. Chris Silverwood, the coach, is out, as is Joe Root. He's no longer captain. Ben Stokes and Brendan McCullum came in, and it has been some fantastic cricket. It's known as Bazball, which has really excited the fans here, and it is going to mean that you really can't call this test. It is on home soil here at Edgbaston. It's the first of 5 tests as they play all around the country over the next few weeks. But it has to say that Australia are in very good form. Last week they won the ICC Test World Cup against India. They are the #1 ranked Test team in the world. There's lots of noise going on around me as the atmosphere, I think, is trying to build here. But yes, all to play for here at Edgbaston today, and I don't think anybody here could call it, but we will be speaking to some fans later on to find out how they're feeling.
Lovely stuff. Jack, thanks very much indeed. It's ridiculously small.
Well, it is, but it is the Ashes, isn't it?
You just thought you want to win something a bit.
They're the Ashes of a stump or something, aren't they?
Yes, they are. Yeah. I think it was from 1892. Maybe one of our viewers or listeners.
Terribly important.
Yes, exactly.
Symbolic.
Yeah. So Ben Stokes is in for this.
Yeah, he is exactly. I mean, I want to turn the clock back all the way back to January 2022. I think it was your first week in the job as a duo presenting on here, and we discussed the Ashes. We discussed England's capitulation down in Australia. Things couldn't have been worse for England back then. We were talking about root and branch assessments. Are we playing too much of the short form game? Are we producing enough players who can perform in the test environment, which really does separate the wheat from the chaff? And there were questions about where England cricket goes from here. To be fair to the ECB, they ushered out Chris Silverwood, who was the coach he was quite conservative. He was going to draw first, try and win on top of that. It wasn't working. He wasn't getting the best out of our players. Joe Root was burdened by the captaincy, still performing well on the field, but not making the best decisions off it in terms of selection. So, to be fair to the ECB, they made changes. They brought in Brendan McCullum, known as Baz, and then heralded the introduction of Bazball. That's what they called it. Bazball. It was an end of conservative cricket. It was more expansive. It was go for it. It was try and hit sixes, try and entertain. England are probably the most entertaining side in the world at the moment. Added to that, it's producing results, Anne. 11 wins from the last 13 tests. Some key changes out on the field as well. Joe Root doesn't look burdened by the captaincy anymore, but he's still an outstanding batsman. But then the next question is, you won 11 in 13 tests, but can you prove it against the Australians? Can you prove it in the Ashes? That's the litmus test, and that's underway today, as Jack said, from 11 o'clock at Edgbaston. They're up against the best pace attack in the world. Australia are always strong, but it's very, very difficult to win an Ashes away from home, and that's what Australia are going to have to do. They've not won it since 2001.
Why?
Right. It's the same as in any sport. You just...
Yeah.
There's a different ball as well. The ball,
when it's Australia
the ball is slightly different. The conditions are different. Maybe you're not used to it, but Australia haven't won it since 2001. In contrast, England have only won once in Australia, and that was in 2011, since 1987, at the era of Mike Gatting and Ian Botham, etc. So it's a good period as well because England can showcase what they can do in a summer when there's no Olympics, there's no World Cup, there's no Euros. They've got a little bit of time, and it finishes before the start of the football season. It finishes a little bit earlier. It's a great thing as well because it goes around the country. It goes to Edgbaston, it goes to Oval, it goes to Lords.
Oh, it travels, does it?
It does, yeah. So everyone sees it. It's a fantastic event.
At some point,
it will be in Nottingham, yeah, exactly. That'd be good, good for the city, given what's happened in the last few days.
It'll be brilliant as well. I mean, I don't know how much longer this good weather's going to last, but it'll be fantastic for the fans today.
And months.
I hope so.
Exactly.
Well, but for the cricket fans, who are so
there
loyal.
Stokes is, as Stephen mentioned, Ben Stokes is in. I mean, his captaincy's been has punctuated that period over the last 18 months or so. He had some injury problems, but he's a great all-rounder. Moeen Ali coming out of, I say retirement, it's red ball retirement. He normally plays a short form of the game. He's very happy there, but it shows the power of McCallum and Stokes to prize him out of red ball retirement, revive that career. He's not played in an Ashes since 2019. That was a draw actually in England, and it was just by an excellent Ben Stokes innings they were able to force the draw. But yeah, I mean we're going to see packed houses at all the events as well. And we're looking forward to an outstanding event.
I just want to quickly do a little bit of football. There's two things.
Yes.
There's England facing Malta this evening, right? But also, more importantly to me, Jack Grealish. He's been getting so much stick over the fact he's a young man who's partying and celebrating. Let him get on with it. Let the boy have a good time.
The man's won the treble.
Yeah.
There are very few English footballers who've done that. There's only that group for Beckham and Scholes, and did that in 1999. So he's in a very select group. Gareth Southgate yesterday said there's a line in terms of alcohol partying. Yes, he has to toe a responsible line as the England manager, but Jack Grealish has crossed the line in terms of success. A lot of England players have not done that. And so he's earned the right to have a party, I would think.
Or 10.
Or 10. I was going to say, it hasn't stopped yet, has it?
No, it hasn't. Well, no, they're playing Malta tonight.
It's not so much that he can't party and drink, I suppose, as much as he wants to. It's the fact that, unfortunately, when he does, pictures of him doing so are all over the papers.
Yes.
And that's when people get a bit uncomfortable about the sort of example.
But that's not his fault,
is it? Fans.
It's not his fault.
True.
Well,
I mean, the thing is, sometimes Dan, the cap fits. And Jack Wilshere had the same problem 10 years ago when he was playing for England. Whenever he was pictured having a cigarette in Vegas in the summer, it would be all over the front pages. There were loads of other Manchester City players who are not English, perhaps, who were on that bus, and they were absolutely, let's say, inebriated, shall we say. And the spotlight wasn't on him quite as much. Yes, it's a little bit unedifying when he can't really stand up. But he's been outstanding this season.
Takes you back to the days of Gaza, though, doesn't it? And where you think, oh, it's not going to end well if you carry on.
It does. And Gareth Southgate does have to, he's England manager. There's a lot of commercial responsibility around him. He does have to, he was like that as a player anyway. I mean, Lee Hendry used to play for Aston Villa, and he said to me one time that he was a bit wayward in his career, and Gareth Southgate was always the one wagging the finger at him. I know somebody who grew up with Gareth Southgate at Crystal Palace, and he said they'd go to Blue Orchid in Croydon nightclub on a Friday night while Gareth used to stay indoors drinking water, and that's why he made a career for himself.
Yeah, well, maybe so. I think Jack should just be allowed to get on with it and celebrate for now.
A word on Gordon McQueen quickly, can we? He died yesterday, age 70, with dementia. An outstanding player for Manchester United and Leeds, and he'll be sorely missed.
Yeah, he certainly will. Aidan, thank you. We'll see you a little bit later on. Still to come, Spotify scrapping the Sussexes podcast. Hooray! More on that and all the latest showbiz news coming up.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing. We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching. Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle.
Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good morning. You're right.
I'm not saying it. Go on, you say this bit. But it's because the director was taking the mickey out of me. So rude. So rude. Thinks he's professional because he did a tiny bit of ITV last night. I mean, it's just...
Oh, really? Is that the sign of professionalism?
Thinks now he's got to work with the big boys. He can't cut the mustard.
I tell you what, let's go through the papers now then, shall we, with Nicky Hobson and Ella Whelan. Stop it. You who gets up and walks around the studio until the last second.
Broken toe.
Don't know where you are half the time.
It's driving me mad. Let's talk about arch remainers, Ella, in the Mail.
My favourite thing to talk about. Let's talk about
Brexit.
Well, listen, we were talking about this inquiry and what it means for Johnson and what it might mean, what it might not mean. It is true that there is any time that Boris Johnson it makes any kind of headlines, it brings out Lord Heseltine and the rest of them to wish that this might be the end of Brexit. And he has been quoted in the Mail talking about the fact that this, he says, is a clarion call to begin the process of restoring our relationship with Europe.
Sakes.
Blah, blah, blah. Which,
Or
you might... Exactly. You can I think you can probably dismiss Heseltine as something of a fantasist and a fanatic. But there is, around this particular issue of rejoining the European Union. But it is true, and I think this is probably something that a lot of people at home are thinking, that there has been a sentiment around, quite a large sentiment within politicians and in the House of Parliament to entertain the notion of some form of not rejoining wholesale, but tinkering around with it, maybe something to do with the single market, maybe something to do with trade. And that really feels like a sellout for people, not just for Brexiteers, but also for Remainers who have some sense of Remain voters who have some sense of democracy. So it's just to remind people that this hasn't gone away. This is always playing, in the background.
It'll go away eventually. I mean, it's just like there was a
Democrat.
It's whether you supported it or not. There's been a Democratic vote. There's a decision. It's happened. Get over it now.
If only MPs thought like you, Stephen, because they don't.
That just drives me.
No, because there's so many people who are standing up now saying this just proves that Brexit hasn't worked. Yeah. There's still time to go back. Let's move on to killer heat waves instead. Scare ourselves to death with that.
Yes, let's scare ourselves to death about this. Some good news, bad news. I mean, obviously we know. I mean, this just is very obvious stories, but we know the country's getting hotter, and it's sort of saying that by the year 2100. Sorry, I had to really read that twice. the average temperature we can expect in London will be 40, 41 degrees on quite a regular basis. And obviously we know past a certain point, obviously, you know, we get up to 30 quite easily now, 33, 35 sometimes. And then once you go up into that upper echelon, things get really, really difficult for human life as much as for animals and kind of, you know, the microbiome and all that kind of stuff. But, I mean, the sort of piece ends by saying, so, you know, lots of people will die because they're not prepared. Apart from this is quite a way away and we are talking about it, so...
We'll adjust by then. We'll adjust.
I mean, we have to. We have to.
The interesting thing is, obviously, you know, one of the reasons why it's so unbearable in London in the heat is because the way in which the buildings are designed, the fact that there's so much glass, you know, all the rest of it. And obviously we go to Mediterranean countries on holiday and it's much more bearable because the way it's designed. And I'm not quite saying that we need to tear down London and rebuild it, but there are ways in which, but hopefully by 2100,
or the Middle East, where
we
people,
can invent things to help mitigate the heat.
I bumped into someone yesterday who's been working in Qatar and says it's regular, it's unbearable, but it has been 60 degrees out there. 60.
Which is just astonishing, really, isn't it?
Oh, it's astonishing. But they're not all dropping like flies.
No, but then everything's aircon, so you just spend your life going from aircon to aircon, don't you?
Yeah.
But, you know, wine companies, vineyards in France, are now buying up hectares of land in Britain because basically it's the same soil. You know, we were practically, close to each other at one point. It's the same land, and now the British land is moving into a climate zone which is agreeable to growing even champagne grapes.
Yeah, well, English wine, Kent wine's absolutely beautiful. So, I mean, growing industry for us.
Yeah, whole new industry.
There you go. Can we have a look at Ella? Just Stop Oil, Just Stopping Opera.
Yeah. You know, the thing you need to do to really convince the masses is to go to Glyndebourne and throw a hissy fit and pop off a confetti cannon. So they seem to, climate activists, there's also a story out from yesterday that climate activists in Sweden smeared red paint over a Monet, which is appalling act of vandalism. There's something they have some kind of griff with the arts. They really want to ruin all kind of artistic
Which is
expression.
weird because they all seem to be posh.
Exactly. Yes. And there's, you know, I don't...
Maybe it's because Monet painted in oil.
Yes, possibly, yeah. I wouldn't put it past them, it being that crude. But what happened in Glyndebourne with this production is they actually popped the cannon off right next to the composer's ear, the conductor's ear. So he had to, which is terrible.
So dangerous.
He had to take himself away and compose himself before he was able to carry on with the production. It was all very disruptive. And what does this do? You know, they say it's about getting the government to halt all new oil and gas production. What does this do to either change politicians' point of view, to change people's point of view?
Actually, it hardens us all against them, doesn't it?
Yeah, you don't have to be an opera fan to know that this is just childish behaviour.
You just know that they just say, oh, what should we do, Tarquin, to get people to notice? Oh, we need to disrupt Glyndebourne.
Well, they ruined the Chelsea Flower... They ruined a garden at the Chelsea Flower Show. I love the Chelsea Flower Show. It's like...
But it was a sustainable garden.
It was a sustainable garden. And they said, oh, because, you know, if you can't eat it, you shouldn't plant it. What nonsense! That's not how the environment works.
They just want us to... I mean, really, it is the most anti-human, misanthropic kind of... We all should just live these miserable, tiny lives, doing nothing nice, and there'll be no art, and we won't eat anything. We'll all just, like, cold gruel. Go away.
Yeah. No, fair enough. Nikki, let's have some positive news in the Telegraph about cancer and this new blood test.
Yeah, so a new blood test has been devised. It's already been trialled in America that can potentially find up to 50 cancers, and it's literally just from a blood test. Either a doctor gives you one, like a local GP service, or they're actually even talking about rolling out a home blood test service where you'd prick your finger and you send it off to get the results. It's transformative. The reason it's here, actually, is because of what we did during COVID, because of home testing. So it's changed people's perceptions about how they treat themselves at home. Really, really excellent news. Apparently, it will completely change cancer diagnosis.
Yeah, they reckon they'll be able to detect cancer before there are any symptoms.
Yes, exactly. And things like pancreatic cancer, brain tumours, which are often quite severe, quite late on, and you can't treat them, they will be able to, you know, they'll be able to get an early warning for them. So it is a really good news story for the NHS, actually.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic news.
I think I remember talking on this show before about the balance between some of this stuff makes you feel a bit cynical and you think, well, why aren't people being treated in hospital? Particularly for older people? the likelihood of someone doing their own blood test prick when they're, I don't know, 82 is, or, you know, or even younger is, you know, there's a kind of generational element that might be a barrier to this. On the other hand, there is making things like this more normal. So actually taking the sting and the fear out of the blood test, of getting it into your own home and making it this sort of, a bit like a urine test, something that you just sort of do and bring to the GP or drop off whatever, could really change people's approach to cancer. Because, I mean, as you know, so much of the reason why people don't go in is because they are almost in denial. They're afraid of the C word. They don't want to face it. And so they're making any of these tests or screenings more accessible.
And eventually, if that really does work, the earlier you can detect it, the cheaper the treatment will be as well.
Absolutely.
So it has a knock-on effect throughout the whole of the health service.
It's great. I mean, they did it with HIV testing, and that's been very successful. So, I mean...
They do bowel cancer screening now with home test kits.
Yeah.
And lots of things are being done, and it does mean that earlier detection will mean, obviously, a better outcome for all, but cheaper for the NHS.
Yeah, it's a win-win.
Yeah, it is a win-win.
Yeah, it is.
What's a lose-lose? You've both reviewed on this. Greenwich Council banning ice cream vans.
Oh, honestly,
what?
It's a consultation to decide whether to ban them on certain roads in Greenwich. If you've driven through Greenwich, it's always a nightmare. It's completely locked. But that's for lots of different reasons. It's not the ice cream vans that are blocking it. I love an ice cream van. I have one on my street. I can't wait for my daughter to be able to eat solid food so I can take her for her first lick of an ice cream. I'm very sentimental about them. They were important to me in Yorkshire as a kid. We didn't have much money, but you could always go get an ice cream.
Yeah,
so just leave them alone.
It's one of those childhood joys you always remember.
Yeah, the sound coming down the road, and I remember everybody would run out of our flats, and you'd go and it would be a social kind of a thing.
Have you had a 99 lately? Because there's still all this hoo-ha over the flakes.
Why? What about them?
Well, the flakes, they're all crumbling. We did a story on it a few weeks ago, and then later on that day, I went and got one outside B&Q. There was an ice cream van. I said, let's go and get an ice cream. I said, how are you getting on with your flakes? And he got the box out. It was like that. And they're all, there's a real job to get
bits. Yeah. Because the ones you get in a 99 are much tinier flakes than a flake.
Oh, yeah, they're half the size.
More compact.
Half the size, but they're all falling to bits, so Cadbury's need to sort that out.
Definitely.
They're still Cadbury's, are they? Still made by Cadbury's?
Yeah, Cadbury's flakes.
Yeah, but I mean the ones that the ice cream vans have.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Oh, good.
Oh, yeah, but they're all fall into pieces, which is no good at all.
Screwball was mine.
Yeah.
Oh, I used to like a screwball.
Yeah. I used to like an oyster.
With the thing at the bottom.
Do you remember you could get an oyster as well from the same sort of ice cream van?
Very nice.
An oyster, no.
Yeah, it would be a wafer oyster shape, and then you'd have a bit of marshmallow in it, and then a load of ice cream as well.
Yeah.
An oyster was wonderful.
Do they still make them, I wonder?
They do. They definitely do.
They
do my ice cream van.
GBNews.
Oh.
Yeah. Oh, there you go.
Our nearest ice cream van, please. If there's
Wheel
one anywhere
one
near.
up outside.
Just wheel up outside.
That would be nice. That would be nice. Lovely. Ella, Nikki, it's been good to see you this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed.
Right, let's bring you up to date with the headlines. And the National Audit Office says the government has a long way to go to meet its asylum backlog goal. It claims it would take 2,500 decisions on cases a week to clear it by the end of the year. And that's despite them already going through 1,130 decisions a week. At least that was during April. The Home Office says it's working non-stop to reduce that asylum claims backlog.
Former Prime Minister Liz Truss has told GB News exclusively that the economic turmoil that followed last year's mini-budget was caused by the economic establishment being too resistant to change. In her first major TV interview since leaving Downing Street, she told Dan Wootton that some MPs don't understand how to improve people's lives across the country.
And popular family meal items have increased by up to 27% over the last year. That's according to the consumer group Which, and it says people pay between 60 to 80 pence more for items like pasta, baked beans and fish fingers. The company also says the cost of a typical Sunday roast has increased by 13%.
Now, here's one that'll get you going. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex's deal with Spotify has ended after the Meghan Markle podcast wasn't renewed for a second season.
Yeah, she's hosted this thing called Archetypes, or Archetypes, I don't know how you're meant to say it, for 12 episodes. And she's chatted to experts about the history of stereotypes levelled against women.
During which she just talked about herself, basically.
Well,
Stephanie Tetchy is here.
Good morning, Stephen and Anne.
I am so delighted because it was so
It was me. I love a bit of self-indulgence, but even for me, with the Spotify and Meghan, it was too much. I think what's happened here, they've bitten more than they can chew. You know, since they've left the royal family in 2020, they've had to think of ways to make money independently, and they've kind of had to sell their souls to all these different, you know, organisations. But it's all good signing your name on the dotted line, but when it comes to actually providing the work, it feels like Harry and Meghan fell short with Spotify. They signed a deal with them for £18 million, and now it's being rumoured they're not actually going to get the full amount because they just didn't, you know, deliver the productivity for the Spotify.
Well, more fool them. I mean, what makes you think that Meghan is an interviewer and that she's going to be able to deliver anything other than talking about herself? I mean, if they paid that sort of money up front without really looking into whether she could deliver the goods, then more fool them.
You see, I think at the beginning there was this big interest in this brand of Harry and Meghan, and because they've said all they needed to say about royal life, about them together, and now it's like, OK, what else have you got to say? And they're very much losing their star factor and that wow factor.
Well, they've actually lost some star friends.
They have, because people are, I think it's, you know, from all the documentaries, apparently they say they don't want to do no more documentaries, no more books, because the people are saying, at the end of the day, this is still your family that you've exposed out there. And I think a lot of people have seen them in a different light. But Meghan is determined. She's not one that's going to step away from the limelight. The rumour has it she's trying to revive her blog, The Tig. So she's trying to do something similar to Gwyneth Paltrow, so it will be like a lifestyle brand.
Oh, I wonder if she'll be as well respected as Gwyneth Paltrow is.
Every woman in Hollywood is trying to do a Gwyneth Paltrow.
That's the thing. I think, you know, for celebrities and for people in the limelight, they try these things because they know they can get the advertisers, they know they can get the following. But as we've seen with this Spotify deal here, it has to be something that brings you longevity. You can't just do it for 6 months. There's people who actually don't get the amount of money these celebrities do, and they do it for years on end, and it's a passion. It's not just a tick boxing exercise.
I mean, even if you think Gwyneth is a bit out there, darling. She has devoted herself to it for years. And it is obviously an obsession with her. But it's become a moneymaker. But it's only because she's put years of hard work into it.
Well, I think the problem, Anne, for Harry and Meghan now is they're going to have to find one thing that they're going to be known for and stick to it. You can't do another Netflix documentary. You've parted ways with Spotify, so what is next for brand Harry and Meghan?
They must have millions upon millions in the bank, though.
Well, you know, eventually that will run out. You have to keep on funding your lifestyle. They've got this big mansion in Montecito, I think it is. So...
And they mix now with people who have more money than them, and that it probably irks.
And I think because Meghan's a celebrity, celebrities always want to be in the limelight, so she's always going to be trying to find new things, where Harry's more used to being a royal and, you know, popping in and out. So I can imagine Meghan has that thirst to be known for something.
Let's talk Al Pacino.
Yes, 83.
Daddy.
Too old, daddy.
Just to explain, he's fathered a child at 83.
He has, and his girlfriend's 29. A lot of people have been wagging their tongues about whether this has been a genuine relationship, but they had been seeing each other for a while, but they had broken up, and apparently Al Pacino had ordered a paternity test because he said at his age he didn't think he was capable of fathering a child, so clearly he is the daddy.
He is the daddy.
But this woman, she's wealthy herself, so she's not she comes from a wealthy Middle Eastern family, so I don't think it's one of those things where she is a gold digger. She's actually been linked to other older men in the past, such as Mick Jagger, Clint Eastwood.
So he's in his 90s.
I know, he's 93. So she has a thing for older men, but clearly she wanted to have a child, and it seems like Al Pacino is still supporting her. But there is that big question now whether it's selfish at that age to have a child. Clearly he has the money, but God knows how long he's got left.
Well, yeah, that's the reality of it, sadly. Stephanie, thank you. We'll see you the next hour.
We must talk about Glenda Jackson.
We are going to talk about
the
Glenda.
wonderful Glenda Jackson. Yeah.
But what we are going to talk about definitely is more turmoil in the Tory party as Boris Johnson allies pressure MPs to vote against that Partygate report on Monday.
This is Breakfast on GB News.
Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Good morning, a crackerjack of a day if you like it, warm and sunny, but there's an increasing chance of thunderstorms and the weather is more on the change through the weekend. Here's the reason why: an area of low pressure just ambling its way towards the UK, bringing more moisture, more humidity, and, as I said, an increasing chance of seeing some thunderstorms. For most, though, it is just a beautiful morning out there. Warm and sunny with light winds, a bit misty and murky around the coast of northeast Scotland, and the cloud is increasing further west as that low pressure approaches. 1 or 2 showers here and there this morning already, but for most, as I said, it's dry. It's this afternoon and through the evening where there's the greatest chance for Wales and northwest England, especially, of seeing some heavy and thundery showers breaking out. For most, it just stays dry and very warm, temperatures in the mid to high 20s. But those thundery showers, where we do see them, could cause some disruption. A lot of rain falling in a short space of time. Lots of lightning, even large hailstones falling. And they'll still be rumbling on well into the evening in the west. Elsewhere, it's going to be a fine, balmy summer's evening. But we'll see more of those heavy, thundery showers breaking out through the night and indeed into the weekend. Pretty warm and humid nights. Again, just like last night, parts of the northeast dropping down to single figures. But elsewhere, that humidity making it fairly difficult for sleeping, and that's going to be a feature of the weather through the weekend. It's going to be humid. It won't be as sunny. The sunshine will be fairly hazy during Saturday. Now, many places will again stay completely dry. It is chiefly in the west where we are looking at thunderstorms breaking out, but even here, they will be hit and miss, but they will again drop a lot of rain in a short space of time. Temperatures, well, mid-20s perhaps, but again, it'll feel just as warm because that humidity building. Again, a tricky night for sleeping into Sunday. Another warm and humid day. Yes, hazy sunshine, but more thunderstorms.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel. Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Fridays from 8, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views, and often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning to you. It's 9 o'clock on Friday, the 16th of June. Today, civil war in the Conservative Party. Divisions have erupted between Tory MPs as Boris Johnson's allies fight for his political career.
And emotional scenes in Nottingham as thousands come together at a vigil for the victims of this week's knife and van attack.
And in sport, the first test of the Ashes against Australia begins today. So can England win their first series on home soil since 2015?
And as always, we'll bring you the latest weather update.
Warm and sunny sums up the weather again for most today, but humidity is building and there's an increasing chance of seeing some thunderstorms becoming more widespread through this weekend. For a full forecast, join me later.
Good morning to you. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Ann Diamond, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
I was just intrigued catching the weather there, our weather teaser, saying it's going to be hot but with thunderstorms this weekend. Did you have any in the week?
Yeah.
Really bad ones?
One big thunderstorm, yeah. Quite frightening. Enormous ploppy rain.
Yeah.
And a heck of a lot of lightning.
Yeah, there wasn't there? I mean, it was really full on. I quite like it.
And what was lovely, well, it was quite dramatic. I was sitting in the garden enjoying the sunshine, and you could see this black, enormous cloud coming in, and then you could feel the sort of temperature change. And the birds were rustling in the leaves of the trees and everything. You think, ooh, something nasty is just about to happen.
Change.
So then you scurry around picking up the patio cushions. Patio cushions are a nightmare to me because I leave them out, they get soaked. And then you think, they're so soaked, I'll have to leave them out until it's dry.
Oh, see, I've got those waterproof ones now.
Yeah, but don't they creak when you sit on them?
No. Oh, these newfangled fabrics.
Oh, you'll have to show me.
Oh, very good.
He's one for gadgets.
And as soon as any little sun comes out, even if it's not very hot, you see the steam coming off them.
And they don't creak too. And do you not get hot and sweaty sitting on them in your shorts?
No, they're not plasticky, no.
Got to find out more about that.
Yes.
And I've just seen something pop up on my calendar.
Oh, aye.
Guess whose birthday it is tomorrow?
Don't know.
The King.
Oh, the official birthday.
Yeah.
Yes, trooping.
It's the official
one.
Yeah.
Trooping of the colour tomorrow.
We'll have to do something with that then, won't we?
We will. Our very own Cameron Walker is going to be down there on Horse Guards Parade tomorrow. He's got his position all set up.
Oh, good.
To be covering all of that.
Well, I'll have to wear my tiara and you'll have to wear your crown.
That's all right. Oh, this is actually the tie I wore for the coronation.
Aha.
I should have saved it for tomorrow, shouldn't I?
Yeah, you have to look out another one.
Never thought. That's me. I'd never think ahead. Just get on with it. Mind you, we better get on with this, hadn't we? Because disingenuous to the point of being deliberately misleading. Now, you'll have heard that yesterday. The damning words that the Privileges Committee used to describe Boris Johnson.
But the former Prime Minister branded those findings deranged and sparked a row amongst Tory MPs about whether or not to actually vote for the report, because it has to be ratified by a vote.
Yeah, let's talk to our Deputy Political Editor, Tom Harwood. There may be a debate over this. There's no doubt of the conclusion, though, is there?
It would be a miracle, frankly, for this to be voted down by Parliament. Where the division in the Conservative Party lies to a greater extent is who's going to vote in favour of this sanction and who's just not going to vote at all. Because ultimately this is a one-line whip on Monday, and that means that there's no sanction for members of Parliament who don't turn up to vote. It's not a mandatory vote. That would be a three-line whip. So a one-line whip, they don't have to turn up. Many of them, I suspect, will find other things to be doing. Perhaps they'll discover in their diary long-standing engagements that had hitherto been unknown to them. But the crucial point now is that MPs are going back to their constituencies this weekend. And they'll be perhaps talking to members of their constituency parties. And this is an interesting fact, because Boris Johnson, whilst his standing in the country has fallen, he is as popular as ever amongst the Conservative base, the Conservative membership. He's very, very popular there. And the Conservative membership are the people who decide whether these MPs have jobs or not. They can deselect MPs if they so wish. They can make MPs' lives very difficult. And so if MPs go back to their constituency associations, have some of these discussions, perhaps some of these meetings, they might be coming under some considerable pressure to go a little easier on Boris Johnson than this committee has, which, let's not forget, the committee recommended a sanction, the second longest suspension of any MP since the Second World War. And think about all of the things, all of the terrible things that some MPs have done. Some MPs have been jailed. Is what Boris Johnson did that level of seriousness? Some people are drawing that into question.
Well, and obviously because he wasn't just an ordinary MP, he wasn't just an ordinary minister, but he was, in fact, the Prime Minister. But that's why he certainly sees it as a witch hunt, and a very vindictive one at this stage.
Yes, on the one hand, the committee says that because this was the most senior minister in the land, they need to be perhaps more stringent with how they deliver this sort of sanction. But looking at their conclusion, and this reaching of the 90 days suspension. And remember, a couple of weeks ago, we were all debating whether it would be 9 or 10 days, whether it would reach over that. And to get 90 days, the 5 reasons they set out in terms of repeated contempts, as they describe it, undermining the democratic process, only one of them is about what this committee was actually formed to look into, which was the quote-unquote deliberately misleading the House. The other 4 reasons listed by this committee are all about how Boris Johnson behaved in front of the committee. It's all a little bit introspective. It's about quote-unquote deliberately misleading the committee, breaching committee confidence, impugning the committee, and indeed being complicit, their words, in a campaign of abuse and attempted intimidation of the committee. So a lot about the committee there, and perhaps less so about what Boris Johnson actually said at the dispatch box.
But is there a sense of this, it's the whole thing, isn't it, about we need to make an example of someone? I mean, in the sense that they could up it to whatever they want, because it doesn't matter, does it? I mean, this is a whole point. 90-day suspension. Well, they can't suspend him. He's not an MP.
This is true. Boris Johnson announced his intention to resign at 8 p.m. on Friday night, and by Monday lunchtime, he had ceased to be an MP. Boris Johnson is currently not an MP. The letters MP do not appear after his name. He did what's known as taking the Chiltern Hundreds, the formal process by which someone can stop being a member of Parliament. So yes, it is a little.
His constituency until the by-election.
Currently, his constituency has no MP. And so until these by-elections, which we now know are going to be midway through next month, there are no people representing the constituents of Uxbridge and South Ruislip.
Is that how it is? They can't even begin the process of a by-election until that MP has stood down?
The MP has to stand down first, and then the process gets underway. The writ gets moved. And that has happened in both Boris Johnson's seat and up in Selby for Nigel Adams' seat. Where it hasn't happened is mid-Buckinghamshire, which is Nadine Dorries' seat, because she has not formally resigned yet.
Now, this is turning into a soap opera, because she's the first one who said she was going to resign on the spot right now, and actually she hasn't, and it clearly looks as though she's not going to.
Well,
What's
not
she
yet,
playing
at least. There is some speculation that she does not want all of these by-elections to happen on the same day. That might be a little bit too easy for Rishi Sunak, for him to sort of cauterise that wound and then move on.
So a loyal Conservative trying to bring down the Conservative government.
Nadine Dorries feels that this is not a Conservative government. Nadine Dorries feels very aggrieved by Rishi Sunak and indeed one of Rishi Sunak's most senior aides, James Forsyth, who she described recently as 2 posh boys trying to stop a working-class girl from getting into the House of Lords. She feels that this is a plot from Downing Street to stop her ennoblement, and therefore she wants to make their lives very difficult. That's the charge. Nadine would not say that that's what she is doing. There is precedent, of course, for MPs to say, I'm resigning and not do it for another couple of months. There's been a couple of cases of that so far in this Parliament. But all the speculation is that Nadine Dorries would quite like her by-election to be in the autumn, perhaps just before party conference season.
All right.
She won't get her ennoblement now, though, will she? She won't get her seat in the House of
But it
Lords.
wasn't the decision for her not to get the ennoblement, as with some other MPs as well. Wasn't that down to the House of Lords Appointment Committee? Yeah, HOLAC.
There is disagreement over this. That's what Number 10 says, and Number 10 say that they simply followed the recommendations from HOLAC. What Nadine Dorries and indeed Boris Johnson say is actually Number 10 is being a bit disingenuous with what they're saying there. They could have followed Boris Johnson's recommendations and sort of re-upped these nominations. And Boris Johnson was saying something to the tune of he'd been given some sort of assurance or thought he'd been given an assurance. And Nadine Dorries had thought she'd been given an assurance, but actually turned out not to be the case. So there are two different sides here, two different stories of different camps saying different things.
Did he have any nominees for the House of Lords in his...
He did.
Oh, yeah.
And they have been approved?
There have been, I believe, 6 or 7 that have been approved.
So Nadine Dorries is the only one who was sort of...
No, there's a few MPs.
Okay.
Stanley Johnson, for example, was one of those reported to have been nominated first, but then ended up not going there. So it is a rather slimmed-down list compared to what Boris Johnson reportedly initially wanted.
OK. Tom, thank you very much indeed. It is like a soap opera.
It is. It's a saga.
They call it a psychodrama, the Labour Party, because they're trying to up it and make it sound more dramatic. But
it
they're
is.
not far off it at the minute with all of this.
Yeah.
If you've got a view...
Somebody would be writing a drama about it right now, wouldn't they?
Oh,
One of those great political dramas I really love.
It'd be good. Here we go. I knew there'd be some here. Boris, but Rosemary. Hi, Rosemary says, so Boris lied. All politicians lie in some shape or form or are economical with the truth. And Janet says, there is a saying, trust a thief more than a liar. You can get to the bottom of a thief, but never a liar.
True.
So, there you go. So, two sort of different views on that one. If you've got a thought, gbviews@gbnews.com.
Let's bring you up to date then with the other headlines. Midwives in England are working 100,000 extra unpaid hours each week. That's according to the Royal College of Nursing, which also says the maternity services remain consistently understaffed. But the government says it continues to invest in growing the maternity workforce.
Former Prime Minister Liz Truss has told GB News exclusively that the economic turmoil that followed her mini-budget last year was caused by the economic establishment being too resistant to change. In her first major TV interview since leaving Downing Street, she told Dan Wootton that some MPs do not understand how to improve people's lives across the country.
The National Audit Office says the government has a long way to go to meet its asylum claims backlog goal. It claims it would take nearly 2,500 decisions on cases per week to clear it by the end of the year. And that's despite 1,130 weekly decisions being made during April. The Home Office says it's working non-stop to reduce the backlog.
And some popular family meal items have gone up by more than a quarter over the last year. That's according to Which. It says people are paying more for items like pasta bake, baked beans, fish fingers, the sort of staples for a lot of families. The company says the cost of living has also affected a typical Sunday roast, up 13%. I have noticed a lot of stuff getting cheaper, though. I know it sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? But things like, because you see the price of bread going up, and there's now been a real push for like the supermarket brand bread, all that to really drop.
Yeah, but that tastes of nothing.
No, I disagree. It's all right. Bang it in the toaster.
Well, it's all right in the toaster, I suppose. And that was the other thing I was thinking of. How many people still have what they call a typical family roast on a Sunday?
Yeah, not as many.
It's an expensive meal, actually, now.
It's not. It used to be a lovely thing to do.
You have to do all the trimmings, isn't it?
Yeah, I suppose you do.
The trimmings what cost.
But it was always a lovely thing to do. I think we've lost some of that tradition. I mean, Sunday working and all the rest of it is part of it as well, but it's part of life nowadays, isn't it? But I did used to like that. You go to church Sunday morning, come back, have the roast.
Oh, yeah.
Rice pudding.
Yeah.
My mother's rice pudding, you either had to sort of eat it with a soup spoon or take a slice.
Oh, God. Well, didn't we talk about about this several months ago.
Probably.
That you make a rice
Sorry,
pudding,
Mum.
or is it porridge, and then you pour it in a drawer, and you wait for about 3 months until it hardens, and then you can eat it like cake.
Yeah, that's porridge.
That's porridge, is it?
Porridge, yeah. Pour it into a drawer and then you just take a slice out. Yeah.
How weird.
Nice.
Cheap, though, I would have thought.
Yeah, it's a good way to eat. Now we've got an exciting new guest joining us this morning.
She is Pip Thompson, the former Good Morning Britain presenter, and joining us here at GB News now as a presenter.
Yes.
And welcome. It's nice to see you.
Good morning.
Hi.
That's not a good start to you guys talking about rice pudding.
Why?
Oh, God, it's disgusting.
Oh, give over. It's lovely.
It's disgusting.
Rice pudding. It's
My
nice.
nan, God love her, used to make it all the time for
When
me.
you get lots of butter in it, you get golden bubbles.
No.
Oh, lovely, lovely.
It's one of those Marmite things, isn't it? You either love it or hate it.
Yeah, I suppose so. Now, you're on air at 12 today. Your debut.
On air at 12. Yeah, stop it. Don't put the pressure on.
Lots of pressure.
I'm on air, 12 o'clock till 3. Lots to talk about, including what I'm very excited about is the Ashes.
Oh, are you a big
The Ashes from Edgbaston. I used to live in Brummieland, and the ground was only a few minutes from my house. So, yeah, I am a bit of a cricket fan. It's inherited from my dad and my brother.
Oh, right. Oh, it should
so
be good,
we're looking forward to that, and we actually have, I'm not going to tell you who it is, but I might give you a few clues throughout the show. We've got a former England cricketer talking to me, telling me what he makes of it so far. The strategy that England now have with the Bazball. And he's a player and also a bit of a cricketing legend.
Oh, very. Oh, I wonder.
Ooh.
Yeah, I wonder.
Anne's
I
just
that
like,
could be.
OK.
I do not understand cricket. Even though, I mean, we worked at Pebble Mill, which is just down from Edgbaston as well, didn't
Yeah, Pebble Mill.
Yeah.
Well, I used to work at Central News.
Yeah.
Where you worked
Well, we
back
were
in
Brummies through and through then to a certain
Is that on Broad Street?
Gas Street.
Gas Street.
Well, it was when I was
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Now, yeah, although I've got a spider on my glasses. There you go. So you're doing the show at 12 o'clock today, but what you're going to be moving to permanently is that 12 o'clock show alongside Mark
I will
Lambert.
be, Stephen. As long as this isn't the first and last
It
show
won't be.
of my career today.
But that'll be fun.
I'm not allowed to give too much away about it at the moment, but it starts very soon. We're going to have lots of, obviously, news stories, great interviews. We want to have a laugh as well. We want to hear from you. We want to hear from you. Get your thoughts on air. It's really, really important.
Oh, it'd be great. Mark's a lovely fella. Now, because you've come from ITV...
I knew there'd be a question about this.
Yeah, well, look, toxic culture. We've heard it from Eamon, we've heard it from Dan Wootton, we've heard it from Dr Raj, all this toxic culture at ITV. Is that your experience?
Let me just make it very clear that I never worked on that show.
Yeah.
OK? I came from Good Morning Britain, so I never worked on that show. I didn't cross paths with the parties involved. You'd see them around, but I didn't cross paths with them. And in terms of where I worked, absolutely, completely not. You know, management, I didn't really see that much of. You know, they work in a different part of the building. But the people I worked with on the ground were just absolutely fabulous. But you were always, I think, like in many places, you're always aware of, you know, the talent, let's say. So, big newsroom with both shows sharing this big newsroom. And I always remember when I left, you know, you'd walk to the kitchen every day and there was a massive picture of Philip and Holly as you go to the kitchen every day. I mean, huge.
Yeah.
You know, you were left under no illusion that they were the stars of the show. But for me personally, I had a great time. I've got lots of friends there. So I'm not going to say what you might want me to say because it just simply isn't something that I recognise.
No, good.
But I did not work on that show.
I think all that matters is reality.
Yeah.
And that's the bottom line. You know, recollections may vary
Yeah.
for various people,
Yeah.
but you can only go off your own experiences, can't you?
Yeah. Exactly. And I can only speak as I find, which I always do.
I mean, I was there for a short while as well, working on Loose Women, and I was very aware of rumours. You must have been aware of rumours.
Of course, Anne, we're journalists.
Well, exactly.
You know, but any newsroom is a hub of gossip.
But isn't it true that after a while, when the rumours get so many and so much, you think, well, there must be something in it. There must be.
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult one, is it? Because rumours aren't fact. We know
when
that.
there's such a lot of them and they're all saying the same thing, That's all I wonder why. You know, and when we see the top executives before the committee the other day, and they were sort of trying to say that, yes, they'd heard rumours, but they asked a couple of questions and that was that. It wasn't good enough, was it?
Well, I mean, it comes down to the whole thing about investigation, how much of an investigation, and, you know, it will become clear, won't it, over the next few months?
Well, I don't know. Do you think it will?
Well, I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope so. I think it has to, because I think it's important for every workplace. You know, because a lot of people, they're saying, oh, this is all tittle-tattle, why do we care? Well, of course we do care, because this sort
we care
of...
because of that
it's
word.
reflected
It's a
in the
duty of
workplace.
care, isn't it? That management should have for its staff.
Yeah,
Staff
but can I just say, where I worked, on the show I worked on, there was absolutely a duty of care, 110%. You know, my immediate managers, my line managers, my editor were always incredibly approachable.
I just wonder how, I mean, watching the evidence on Wednesday, I wonder how realistic it all is, in the sense that that level of management they were talking to are up there.
Yeah, right.
And having worked in a big news organisation before here, they're not going to be aware of what's going on in a newsroom or within a particular environment.
Well, and also don't forget, for some of the time, I know it's all moved over now and everybody's more together, but, you know, that top tier of management worked out of a different building.
Yeah.
So...
Yeah, you
maybe
never
they
see
shouldn't.
them.
Maybe top tiers of management shouldn't work out of different buildings.
Well, they have moved. They have moved now. Okay. I mean, you know, I saw the chief exec in the canteen now and again.
Yeah. But
didn't have an in-depth chat, but
no,
I saw her near the coffee machine.
You're like, Pip, get out. Make me a coffee or get out. Anyway, look, good luck with the show today.
Thank you very much.
Be interesting, be worth a watch.
Well, thank you. It'd be nice to have your...
Well, you've certainly landed at GBNews at an interesting time. There's plenty to talk about.
Yeah, there is. Keep you going.
And I left my previous place at an interesting time.
You certainly did, yeah.
It's a fair point, but you probably wouldn't be able to talk about it as much there. There you go. Pip, thank you very much indeed. So Pip's going to be on air with you from 12 till 3 today.
Meanwhile, we've got lots more to come for you, including how to get a great holiday deal without being scammed. This is Breakfast on GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing. We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before
and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good morning to you. This is Breakfast with Stephen and Anne. Loads of you getting in touch. I've got to say hello to Karen, because she's confused me, Karen. She says, I'm watching you from sunny Elgin in Blackpool. Now, there's Elgin in Scotland. There's an Elgin hotel in Blackpool. I don't know about Elgin in Blackpool. I don't know. So I don't know.
Karen should know if she's there.
She should know she's there. But anyway, brought my 91-year-old dad, and it's been a fabulous week.
Yeah, because we were asking you what you're going to get up to this weekend. Christine says she's off to a wedding in Hampshire tomorrow. And Yvonne, who's a retired podiatrist,
Oh, yes.
Is worried about your toe,
Oh, so am
what
I.
you have broke. She said, strap the toe next to its neighbouring toe. See if that helped.
Yeah,
That's what you've already done,
I've done that.
Yeah.
I've done. To be fair,
It just takes a while to heal.
It does take a while for on the mortgage rates thing, because Tom earlier on was a very good expert on mortgages. He said the comparisons made between the 1980s and now, Tom mentioned the big difference was the price of homes in the 80s were much lower than today. Very true, as were average salaries. Yeah, but what he was saying, the point he's making is the differential between the house price and the salary was less.
Yeah,
Smaller,
yes, the difference was.
So it made it much more affordable to buy a house.
Right, David says, can we please wish my beautiful and wonderful wife a very happy 50th birthday?
Oh, happy
She's
50th.
a massive fan of you both. So we don't know your name, but David's wife, have a very happy 50th today.
Very young.
Yeah, absolutely, very young. Yeah. And we were talking about older fathers.
Oh, yes, we were.
Because who was it who's just had a baby at 83?
Al Pacino.
Al Pacino, that's right. Well, David says, as a 56-year-old single father of 10-year-old twin girls.
So
Gosh,
say
that's
10,
quite something.
10 twin girls.
Yeah,
would have
no,
been interesting.
10-year-old twin girls. But he's
Get you busy.
56, right? He says, I can tell you this. I spend more time teaching my girls to be good, honest people. They are presentable, smart and do their best. Now, he said, compare me to the many 20 or 30-year-old dads who just sit in front of a PlayStation and teach their children nothing.
Well, no, I mean, it's a fair point. It's a fair point, David.
Yeah.
But it's not. I mean, so you had yours at 46.
Yeah.
45, 46. This is the difference. Really, you're talking about those people in their late 70s, 80s, or even older. And it's. Are they going to be around? How long are they going to be around for? 2-3 years? That's the question,
Yeah,
really. Not
yeah.
Not people of your fine age.
The child will always be well-financed.
Yeah.
But that's not always the point, is it?
No.
Every child wants a dad around. We don't all get that chance.
No.
But every dad, that's what most children want, isn't it? Mums
But anyway,
and dads around.
but it's good to get all your thoughts on that this morning. I love this, on caesarean births, because we were talking about that in the paper review and how apparently you should daub the child in juices when it's born.
How you were going to say that?
And it's good for them, apparently. Pete says it can be a problem, a caesarean birth. My wife was a caesarean baby. Every time we park the car, she gets out through the sunroof.
Oh, yeah.
You see, if she was doused in juices, she may not do that.
Not juices, it's birth canal fluid. Isn't that better than juices? All right, how about we get a bit of good news? Alan says, I've just had my monthly debit for energy bills reduced by £40 a month because of the reduction in prices. Good news needs reporting.
Yes, fair point.
Yeah.
Fair point, they are coming down a bit now. Fingers crossed it
Just
lasts. A bit. Now, talking of money, actually, do you feel vulnerable to scams when you're trying to find a good deal for that holiday?
Half of Brits have revealed that they feel at risk whilst trying to find an online bargain.
Well, let's talk to travel expert Rob Staines, who joins us. Good to see you, Rob. How do we then work out what's a good deal and what's a con?
Hi guys, good morning. Well, yes, it's not easy, and it seems like travel is quite difficult to navigate these days. And there's actually been some really interesting research that's been put out by the Post Office that actually said that whilst 74% of us said that our summer holiday was the highlight of our year, over 50% of us said we felt really, really worried about getting scammed whilst booking for our holidays. So it just goes to show that consumers are feeling really vulnerable at the moment to travel scams, which have risen exponentially over the years. You know, last year, £15 million was lost to holiday fraud. Scammers took advantage during the pandemic, and it shows no sign of abating as we go into this cost of living crisis. But that's why I sort of teamed up with the Post Office to do this research and to advise people of how we can be scam aware, what we can look out for, and how to avoid those pitfalls so that we can all get away as safely and as affordably as possible.
So what do these scams look like? I mean, are people just paying up front for holidays that never happen, or what?
Unfortunately, very often, yes. It actually happened to a friend of mine very recently. But the research, you know, it says it all really. There's lots of things that we can do to actually protect ourselves and stop ourselves from being so vulnerable. So, you know, one thing I would say to anybody at the moment is only book with a reputable company that you know and that you trust, because 15% of those surveyed said that they would book a holiday with a company they'd never heard of if they saw a really cheap price. So please don't ever do that. And if you are unsure of a company, go online, look at reviews. We're not just looking at bad reviews. We're also looking at, you know, no reviews at all, or those reviews that are making that company we've never heard of sound like the best travel company in the world. That should be a red flag to anybody. And look out for really, really cheap holidays that are asking for extremely high deposits in comparison to the overall cost. You really should be trusting your gut at the moment. You know, if it seems too good to be true, it most likely is. So do your research, shop around. Maybe if you found your holiday, go onto other sites, see what they're charging for a similar holiday. If it's a flight only, go to the airline's website. If there's a massive disparity in the price, you should really be backing off. Don't go for it. And please, please, never pay for anything via a bank transfer. It's basically like handing over a wad of cash. A reputable company will never ask you to pay via bank transfer. So always book your holidays and pay for it using your credit card, because that gives you far greater financial protections under Section 75 of the Consumer Credit Act.
Is it about time we all return to the good old trustworthy travel agent?
Well, I must say, I'm a big fan of a travel agent, so big up all the travel agents out there. I think personally, throughout the pandemic and during the cost of living crisis, they have shown their real worth. You know, they're trusted people. They are experts in what they do. They also have access to a whole plethora of deals that many of us won't have access to just if we're booking alone. So they'll also offer you far greater protections. If anything goes wrong, for example, they'll be able to hold your hand and advise you throughout. So yeah, absolutely. Please try and book a package holiday, preferably with a travel agent that is ATOL protected, because they are going to give us far greater consumer protections under the package travel regulations.
Yeah, I mean, I know about 10 years ago, 15 years ago, everybody thought it was the death of the travel agency because we'd all become a bit more computer aware and we were shopping around for deals that we could fix ourselves. But to a certain extent, that bubble has burst, hasn't it? And I know family members who've gone back to their trusty travel agent and say, do you know, it's amazing. All of that headache that you used to take on yourself of trying to knit everything together, actually, they do it really well. And just as you said, they do know of some deals and some recommendations they can make that you would never have thought of.
Yeah, travel agents are absolutely great. You know, I think when people think of package holidays and going to travel agents, they tend to think of these like bargain bucket holidays that maybe aren't like sort of bucket and spade places. That I mean, I love those holidays, but to some people that doesn't necessarily, it's not an attractive offering. But actually, when we're talking about going to a travel agent or we're talking about package holidays, you know, all you need to do is book a flight and just add on one thing like a hotel or car hire or an excursion, just to package it all up within the same booking, and then you are much better protected. But we all know what travel's been like over the last few years. The pandemic was, excuse the pun, extremely turbulent, wasn't it? So travel agents, those that have booked with travel agents over the years, have really found out that actually those are the trusted people that are there to look after them when you're not sure what to do and things don't quite go to plan. So it's really, really important. And I would urge anybody to book with a travel agent. And a lot of travel agents are expanding on the high street at the moment. And that is something that we desperately need as well. So it's a win-win for everybody.
Rob, really good to see you this morning. You look like you've just come back from somewhere hot and exotic. Thank you very much indeed. We did the honeymoon through a travel agent.
Did you?
Not one, because I've never really used one before.
No, but did they take the headache off?
Oh, it was all just over the phone. It's someone that my parents had actually used and recommended. She was brilliant. We want to go here and here, sort out, this is the type of hotel we want. We want to do these, you know, think of some nice excursions for us to do, or day trips or whatever. She came back with a list. This is what you've got.
I think we've forgotten how good they were.
We buy all the tickets for you. It's all sort of sorted out.
And at the end of the day, if anything goes
so
wrong, you've always got a phone number to ring and a person to speak to that you've already got a relationship with.
Yeah, it was really good actually for that sort of thing. They're not necessarily the cheapest way of doing it. That's the downside.
They should be able to ameliorate the cost with just the way they do things. But what I've always found very stressful when you're trying to book a holiday and do it all yourself is that the cookies that chase you on the computer.
Oh, yeah.
Suddenly you find that the flight you thought was £506 10 minutes ago has suddenly gone up by 20 quid. Yeah. And it's not because the price of the ticket has actually gone up, although, I mean, it has. It's because the cookies on the computer are watching you. So you have to keep going back and deleting your cookies, or whatever you do to cookies, I can't remember.
Yes, you do. You clear your cache.
You clear your cache, yeah, which is an absolute faff to have to keep doing. But it's the only way to try and keep a level playing field.
Yeah, it's not easy. No, if you can get someone else to do it.
Exactly.
Very nice it is too.
Yeah.
Look, still ahead, we've got all the sport as England take on Australia in the Ashes, and we've got showbiz as Spotify drops the Sussexes podcast. This is GB News.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel. Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan tonight, Fridays from 8, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now? Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 9:40. Welcome back. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Anne.
And it's a big day if you're into cricket today because the first test of the Ashes begins. England are looking to win their first Ashes on home soil since 2015 as they take on Australia at Edgbaston.
Yeah, now England have called Moeen Ali out of retirement to try to claim back the trophy after losing in the 2021-22 series.
So let's go to the West Midlands now, to Edgbaston, where you'll find our West Midlands reporter Jack Carson, and the atmosphere is building and it's going to be a great day, I think, Jack, isn't it?
Good, yeah, quite excited. The sun's out. Yeah, looking forward to welcoming the Australians and hopefully we'll put in a good performance. Yeah.
Well, they look like they're enjoying themselves for a start, which gives miles. So, you know, it's just changed everything because now they've got the freedom to go out there. If we lose, I don't think they're under pressure. And also, we're not going out there just to stop them from getting us out. We're going out there to literally put runs on the board.
Excited. I always, for any series, and any Ashes series in particular, there's excitement, but I think this series, I don't think in this country there's been as much excitement, anticipation around a series like this, and I'm talking absolute years. Like the 05 series, the most iconic series of all time, was legendary. Given the way England are playing, given how good we've been over the last year, and to be fair, we have to appreciate this Australia team are arguably the best team in the world. They're World Test champions. Literally everything about this series is just set up for it to be an absolute cracker. I think it's going to be close, we're going to see drama, and of course, given the way England are playing cricket, we're going to see plenty of excitement.
Well, those are just some of the rather excited fans that you've been speaking to, Jack. What's the atmosphere like at Edgbaston today?
Do you know what, there is a tinge of nervousness in the air here at Edgbaston because really, as you heard from those fans there, nobody really knows what to expect. There's a lot of confidence in this England side since, of course, a couple of years ago there was a big changes made with Chris Silverwood leaving and Brendan McCullum coming in as the coach in this new type of cricket that England are playing called Bazball. It's exciting, it's attacking. Ben Stokes, of course, is now the Test captain. A lot of leadership, good leadership from the fans here. They believe he's shown in this side, and so but there is a tinge of nervousness. Australia are an incredible. This Australia side are an incredible cricketing side. Last week at the ICC World Test Championship, they beat India. They are the #1 ranked Test side in the world, and so this really is all to play for. But it is on home soil. Edgbaston, known throughout the years, maybe not so much recently, but known throughout the years as a bit of a fortress. It's a good place for this England side to kick off the first Test of this Ashes series. Of course, have not won the Ashes since on home soil since 2015. Australia have won the last 2 of the 3 Ashes tests. Of course, 18 months ago it was a bit of a capitulation down in Australia, losing the test 4-0. And so there's a lot of redemption that this England side want to bring here at Edgbaston today. They have won 13 of their last test matches. So yeah, like I said, it really is all to play for. But the atmosphere is really heating and hotting up here, as well as the weather. There are some hats for sale just up the road. I'm thinking about getting them because it's getting a bit more sweltering as the day goes on. But it's a beautiful day here at Edgbaston for some cricket.
You've got to have your cricket trilby or whatever they call them, the hats.
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, you have to, don't you? You have to wear the full works. Take your little sandwich box with you. And...
Oh, yeah, that'd be quite nice.
Oh, aye. Yeah.
Just to relax and enjoy. You look like you're kitted out for the cricket, Aidan.
Yeah, I've been
to be fair.
Squad. Yeah, I've got a flight to Australia in about.
Yeah.
No, sorry, no, I don't need a flight. It's not in Australia, is it? I'm going to Essex. I'm going to Essex tonight for the Essex Eagles in the T20 against Glamorgan. I don't get to cricket very often, but I thought I'd get into the spirit of things.
Oh, absolutely.
But you're right. It's about beer, picnics, that kind of stuff. You really have to kind of be psyched up for it.
Yeah.
It's not like going to the football.
No.
I used to live just down the road from what's the one in North London?
Lords.
Lords, thank you very much. Yeah, sorry, but I did. It was lovely when you knew the cricket was on because you'd get all these old, middle-aged, young men actually going past, but with the tie, the hat.
Well, there'd be members of the MCC.
Box.
There'd be members of the MCC there, so it'd be the red and yellow striped tie.
And you thought, oh, this is summer, this is cricket. But here it says at the top of my Daily Telegraph, Stokes warns Australians they are stepping into an England cauldron. What does that mean?
Yeah, that's the psychology of the Ashes. You know, that's been going on for decades and decades. But the psychology is very important. Yeah, possibly. But it's very, very tough, Anne, to win a series away from home, and that's what Australia are going to have to do, and that's why the psychology starts just now, because 4 years ago, it was at Trent Bridge where they fell apart. They looked as if they were going to win for all the world, and then Ben Stokes produces this innings from nowhere and forces the draw, and that's going to play on their mind psychologically. It's been a huge turnaround as well for England in the last 18 months. I mean, I think it was the first week you were here, we were discussing another collapse for England down in Australia. They lost 4-0. There was a lot of soul-searching going on, talk of root and branch changes within England's set-up. The ECB dispensed with the former coach Chris Silverwood, who was very, very conservative. It was draw first, win second, quite a boring type of brand of cricket. It wasn't necessarily getting the best out of our players. There were questions over whether we were too invested in the short form of the game, which is helpful for broadcast and advertisers, but not necessarily conducive to producing test sides. But the change has been noticeable, there's no doubt about that. 11 wins from the last 13 tests. A much more expansive brand of cricket. England are possibly the most exciting side in the world right now. But there comes a test, and that's always the Ashes. Can you do it against Australia? Yes, they're at home, but it's going to be Bazball, which is that's what Brendan McCullum came in. His nickname is Baz. It's known as Bazball.
It's a style of batting,
quite popular,
or
any cricket, but particularly batting. Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, Joe Root has been relieved of the captaincy 18 months ago, but it hasn't stopped him producing great cricket on the pitch. They've got a strong middle order as well, and so they go into this series with no inferiority complex. That's not always the case against Australia, and as I say, Australia hasn't won here since 2001. So that's where the psychology comes into it. And, you know, I think we're going to have a really good summer of cricket. And the schedule's very good as well because there's no Olympics, there's no World Cup, there's no Euros. And so you should see an opportunity for England to showcase their ability.
Yeah. How much psychology is going to be needed by England taking on Malta tonight in the football? Not a lot.
No. I mean, which is just as well considering a lot of key players have been drinking for the last 4 or 5 days in the wake of England. Manchester City winning the treble. But, you know, some would say Jack Grealish has earned the right to do that. Malta are ranked 173rd in the world. You would imagine that England's 4th or 5th 11 would be able to dispense with Malta. And also, Stephen, the hard work's been done in qualifying. I believe they won away in Italy. No, that never happens. I don't think it's happened since the 1970s. So, you know, I mean, this time last year they were playing Nations League games. They're losing 4-0 at home to Hungary at Molineux. There were a chance for Gareth Southgate to go. I don't think this will represent much of a challenge this evening.
It'll be hot in Malta, though, won't it?
Yes, it will. But it's just... do we really have to schedule international matches for right at the end of the season? You're always going to get this problem. Ooh. And so, you know...
Was it Malta you were in when you sent me those nice pictures and that video call with that nice couple?
That's right, yes.
Oh, that looked lovely.
Yes.
Oh, that looked nice.
I've been to Malta.
That looked nice. She had a really lovely holiday in Malta.
Oh, Malta. But it is boiling, boiling, boiling hot at this time of year, that's all.
Yes, it is, yeah, it is.
That was a lovely couple. Didn't they invite me to go and stay with them?
Yes, they did. And they are a lovely couple, and I'm sad to tell you that he has died.
No!
Yeah. And if you're watching, they are huge GB News fans. This is this lovely couple in Malta I got to know.
Oh.
They are massive GB News fans, and they're probably watching right now. But sadly, David has died, yeah.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
And our love goes out to you, it really does. Sorry, I didn't want to say that as a downer, but since you mentioned it, because I know she'll be watching.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I am so sorry to hear that.
But they were lovely. I loved your cat, didn't they?
Yeah, well, at least I had the pleasure of talking to David.
And they sent Timmy some cat treats. Yeah.
Dreamies, yeah, always good.
He gets enough of those already, Timmy.
Oh,
He does, absolutely. But these were from Malta.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Maltese. Now, can we talk about people passing away? Gordon McQueen has died at the age of 70.
Yeah, he was diagnosed with dementia 2 years ago. Lots of speculation around whether that could have been caused by heading the ball. It's quite a prevalent thing in recent years, but I mean, that from diagnosis to his passing, it's only been 2 years, not very long. His daughter, who I work with, the wonderful Hayley, I worked with her for 10 years in my previous job. She campaigned tirelessly in recent years to try and make footballers aware of the damage that can be caused by heading the football. In terms of his career, an outstanding career. Started off quite modestly in Scotland with St Mirren and Airdrieonians. Both of those tweeted out condolences yesterday. He went on to Leeds United. He won the league title in 1974, played for Scotland, scored the winner at Wembley in a home international, swashbuckling centre-back coming forward. The first kind of centre-back really to score goals in the opposite area. He came in as well at Leeds United as replacement for Jack Charlton, so he had huge boots to fill. And then he went to Manchester United, and I think it was about 1974-75. Missed out on the European Cup final through injury, but played for Man United in the 1979 Cup final against some real greats of the game. Alongside some greats of the game, Lou Macari, who offered his condolences yesterday, Steve Coppell, the Greenough brothers, Alex Stepney in goal, Gordon Hill. So an outstanding United side. And then he left United in '85 when he didn't make it into the FA Cup final squad in which they lost, where they beat Everton in '85, and he went off to Hong Kong. Went off to become a pundit after that. He was a reserve team manager at Middlesbrough. He's also assistant manager to Brian Robson. But yeah, he'll be sorely missed.
Oh, you really do know your stuff. You're encyclopedic.
He does. Aidan, thank you. Now I've only got one thing to say.
Oh.
Because Stephanie Tetchy is here. Are you ready? Give me a hand.
Yeah.
Baby, I'm your man.
If you're gonna do it right. Sorry. Sorry, guys.
Lord.
I love a sing-along with Stephen. I do love a sing-along with Stephen. Wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. They're having a documentary. Their documentary's coming out on Netflix very soon. We've got a trailer of it. You know, Wham were only together for 4 years, from 1982. The last time they performed was in Wembley Stadium in 1986. So obviously George Michael has passed away, but Andrew, his band member, is put a documentary together of unseen interview footage and their personal archive.
Let's have a look.
Let's introduce the band. George, I'm Andrew.
We had a #1 album, we had a string of hit singles, and we were selling out arenas.
How can the country be in love with these two idiots?
We met when I was 11 and Andrew was 12.
And there was only ever one thing that I wanted to do. Be in a band with George.
Andrew changed my life in exactly the way someone needed to change my life if I was going to be a pop star.
And that was it. Wham!
I bet it's unbelievable. They were kids.
Really. I know. They had been friends since they were like teenagers, and to rocket to that stardom that they did, they were like the first Western pop act to perform in China. So even though they were together for 4 years, they just had so much success, and, you know, 30 years later, we're still talking about them. So I think it'll be quite interesting to watch their story.
I think it's fascinating because they're a little piece of... There's something about Wham that was a little nugget of 80s history that just resonates with everybody.
Definitely, and I think a lot of fans from that era, they just kind of connect with that youthful spirit that they had. And before the boy bands of today, you know, they have to look back at Wham and see how it was done. And I think there's always this fascination with George Michael, even though he's gone, and the story he had with Wham and then him as a solo artist as well.
I think also because they were down to earth, good lads.
Yeah.
They were
London
very.
lads.
I mean, when you interviewed them, they were just lovely. They didn't put on airs.
Have you interviewed them before?
Oh, many times. Yeah, I interviewed them first of all when they were hardly known at all. In fact, we were so upset that we would get their names wrong. We made them little name badges, put them on, said they'd been sent in from a viewer. And I said to George Michael, one of our viewers wrote in those days you couldn't email in. We wrote in and said, if you're going to have Wham on, could you get them to do a little sketch? Because George Michael is a really good sketch artist, and he drew a sketch of the whole thing. And we sent it to her. I don't know if she's still got it somewhere.
Probably.
Yeah.
She has.
But that's what I mean. That they were ordinary and lovely. They were ordinary.
And just down to earth. And I think I saw George Michael perform in Wembley Stadium like about maybe 10 years ago, and he was amazing. That voice is incredible.
I mean, that's part of the fascination with them now is the tragedy around it, because George Michael was so talented. Unbelievably talented musician, singer, songwriter, the whole works, and yet deeply troubled.
It's always the way with the stardom. There's always the talent and then behind the scenes,
Always a lovely, lovely person.
It came out after he died just how many favours he'd done for people.
Oh, yeah.
So he just didn't want a pat on the back necessarily. But I remember Andrew originally wearing a QPR kit in the Edge of Heaven video in about 84, 85.
Yeah.
I said to him, I want that for Christmas.
Favourite Wham song?
Favourite Wham song, probably Edge of Heaven.
Mine's Last Christmas, of course.
Careless Whisper.
Careless Whisper.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, really? Oh, there you go. You see, we're on par. Look, thank you both. Stephanie, Aidan, we'll catch up with you both tomorrow. Yes. Look forward to that. But that is it from us for today. We're back.
Stay tuned, because Esther and Phil are here with Friday Morning. We'll be back with you in the morning at 6.
Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Good morning, a crackerjack of a day if you like it, warm and sunny, but there's an increasing chance of thunderstorms and the weather is more on the change through the weekend. Here's the reason why: an area of low pressure just ambling its way towards the UK, bringing more moisture, more humidity, and, as I said, an increasing chance of seeing some thunderstorms. For most, though, it is just a beautiful morning out there. Warm and sunny with light winds, a bit misty and murky around the coast of northeast Scotland, and the cloud is increasing further west as that low pressure approaches. 1 or 2 showers here and there this morning already, but for most, as I said, it's dry. It's this afternoon and through the evening where there's the greatest chance for Wales and northwest England, especially, of seeing some heavy and thundery showers breaking out. For most, it just stays dry and very warm, temperatures in the mid to high 20s. But those thundery showers, where we do see them, could cause some disruption. A lot of rain falling in a short space of time. Lots of lightning, even large hailstones falling. And they'll still be rumbling on well into the evening in the west. Elsewhere, it's going to be a fine, balmy summer's evening. But we'll see more of those heavy, thundery showers breaking out through the night and indeed into the weekend. Pretty warm and humid nights. Again, just like last night, parts of the northeast dropping down to single figures. But elsewhere, that humidity making it fairly difficult for sleeping, and that's going to be a feature of the weather through the weekend. It's going to be humid. It won't be as sunny. The sunshine will be fairly hazy during Saturday. Now, many places will again stay completely dry. It is chiefly in the west where we are looking at thunderstorms breaking out, but even here, they will